Addressing climate change is really at the core of what we do at M-KOPA. While we're a financing company, we see financing for consumers as a critical enabler for allowing customers to switch from potentially harmful uses of energy to more renewable ones. We have done this historically with our solar home systems and look forward to doing it with other kinds of devices like electric motorbikes or electric cars. So really we see financing for consumers as an important enabler in allowing consumers globally to move from harmful power sources or not energy efficient appliances to more renewable energy sources.
Across Africa, smallholder farmers supply products into local and international markets. But most smallholder farmers lack access to resources to improve their productivity and incomes. As a long-term investor with over 50 investments across the African continent, AgDevCo is well placed to help connect agribusinesses and smallholder farmers in ways that deliver benefits for all involved. We provide long-term flexible capital to growing agribusinesses, and we can mobilize soft funding to support technical assistance programs. Through our Smallholder Development Unit, under a 5-year program supported by the MasterCard Foundation and the UK government, we have helped agribusinesses engage smallholders more effectively as suppliers and customers. This work will be continued through AgDevCo's Technical Assistance Facility, which shares best practice and other lessons learned from over a decade of investing in Africa. We have invested in commercial agribusinesses in East, Southern, and West Africa that have linked hundreds of thousands of farmers to markets, of whom 37% are women. In northern Uganda, we have provided working capital to the Gulu Agricultural Development Company, GADC. GADC is revitalizing the region's economy, buying organic cotton, sesame, and chilies from 30,000 smallholder producers.
Through the support of AgDevCo, farmers were trained in good agronomic practices using video-based trainings, which benefited a lot of female farmers in our network.
Over the next decade, we plan to double our investment portfolio and to continue to support our investees with technical assistance. We invest to create commercially sustainable agribusinesses that help improve the livelihoods and resilience of thousands of smallholder farmers and employees. That's how we transform African agriculture to benefit both people and planet.
Farmers around us here have no access to electricity, no access to clean cooking fuel, and no access to milling. So to mill their rice and groundnuts and maize, they have to drive miles away to Gulu. They have to pay for transport, they have to pay for storage and accommodation.
Mandulis is an electricity company that uniquely also provides agricultural value addition. Farmers bring us their crops, and we turn this into higher value products. This alone doubles their income. We're trying to create a way of generating electricity that delivers value to the local communities in which we operate.
Now, we've come here so that we use the waste from all the farming around us to produce electricity through biomass gasification at each of these sites.
At the same time, that focus on biomass means we can not only generate electricity, but we end up with a byproduct, that biochar, which can be used to produce cooking fuel. Doing that means that we save nearly 1 million trees per annum. Technology is a thread that ties everything together. We combine the blockchain technology, AI, and Internet of Things to make sure that we can address critical bottlenecks that allows us to engage thousands of farmers. And the cost of settlement of electricity transactions go down significantly.
In a sense, energy is the center of entrepreneurship in the regions, and by providing these underserved areas with access to electricity, we're hoping that it won't just turn on a light, it'll turn on a movement towards improving people's lives in those regions.
Now is the time for the free world to fight back and to use the power of economics and technology to promote freedom, not fear.
This year's G7 summit in Cornwall will be about how we build back better.
As we seek to advance the causes of free trade, free enterprise, freedom and democracy.
If we don't get serious about climate change today, it will be too late for our children to do so tomorrow.
Together with our friends and partners, we can make sure there is no doubt that sexual violence in war is a red line that must not be crossed.
The United Kingdom, Australia, and the United States are creating a new trilateral defence partnership known as AUKUS.
Our adversaries seek to use economics and technology as tools of control. We want to use them as tools of liberation.
This deployment will project our influence and demonstrate our commitment to the peace and security of the region.
Further humanitarian aid for the very serious situation in Afghanistan. I saw firsthand how the UK is helping British nationals and vulnerable Afghans.
We stand with Ukraine in supporting their security and defence and helping them become more energy independent. Britain is determined to work with our friends to form a network of liberty that spans the world.
At UK Export Finance, we help companies win, fulfil and get paid for international business by providing guarantees, insurance and loans. As the world becomes greener than ever before, there are huge opportunities for businesses across the UK to be at the vanguard of the sustainable future. We provide the tools businesses need to tap into green markets across the world and have already dedicated over £2 billion of lending to financing clean growth.
First Subsea, primarily an oil and gas business, focused on connection systems, deep water oil and gas developments. We thought renewables was an up-and-coming industry. The products that we're providing now are for fixed and offshore wind. We are connecting the cables to the platforms. We understood quickly that the commercial proposition was very different, which meant that we did have to get a UK EF facility to help us along. The pitch was that they could offer us approximately a like-for-like 50% stake in any bonds that we needed, along with our bank. We have potentially had a major game change in this business because of this funding.
ODE has been involved in the design and engineering project management sector for over 50 years, primarily in the early days, oil and gas. Over the last 20 years, we've been involved in offshore wind. The size of the market, we're talking trillions of dollars.
We all know there's a transition that has to be made, and it's great to be part of that process. The UKEF support has been really important. The general export facility that we've been provided with specifically is for a project in Poland that we're working on. It allows us to put in place performance security then secured by our bank up to 80%.
Talk to UKEF, they'll help you set up the financing facility, and that's something that's been incredibly important to ODE.
What we're trying to do is actually stop the walking, 3, 4, 5 kilometres to get the water and actually bring the water to the people. To get that water, we need solar, and we use solar-powered pumps. It's a cashless-based system. You tap on it, and it gives you 20 litres of water or a litre of water. So UK Export Finance actually funded the project by providing 85% of Export Credit Agency funding. Without their trust and belief in us as a company and the objectives, we wouldn't be where we are today. So UK Export Finance, thank you.
The UK can be very proud of our expertise and quality, which are in demand around the globe. UKEF is here to provide the financial support our exporters need to grow and spur an international green industrial revolution.
I do believe that by changing the way we grow our crops and the crops we grow, we can definitely mitigate the changing climate.
We need to take some of the world's best sustainable agricultural practices, make them better, and then widely adopt them.
We can no longer keep on degrading our soils. We must start now and build resilient ecosystems, all while storing soil carbon.
Changing agricultural practices can cut emissions while making us more resilient to climate change. And it will also provide enough healthy food for everyone. This could be the greatest win-win we have in tackling climate change.
Good morning, everyone, and just like to introduce myself. I'm Andrew Ockenden. I'm the Development Director for the British High Commission in Kampala. I'd like to give a fantastically warm welcome to representatives of the Ugandan government and UK government, representatives of UK and Ugandan business, and members of the diplomatic community. Welcome to the first ever Uganda-UK Green Growth Conference. And it's fantastic to see so many delegates here at such an important time for setting UK and Uganda strategy on green growth. So look, we've got a really packed schedule today and over the next 2 days, and we'd really like to get you involved in all of the sessions. So look, we've got loads of expertise in the room. We've got loads of different perspectives. Please do feel free to get involved and particularly to use the comment board to ask questions of some of the UK and Uganda's leading voices in green initiatives. Look, we've got a packed agenda. I know everybody's keen to kind of get going, so we're not going to stand on protocol, and we're just going to allow speakers to focus on substance. And to demonstrate that, without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Her Excellency Kate Airy, the British High Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and it's a delight to be here. And thank you very much. It's lovely to see everyone present, and welcome to everyone joining online. I think everyone will know, I hope everyone will know, that the UK hosted COP26, the climate change conference, last November in Glasgow. We saw nearly 200 countries come together to take action on climate change and forge what we call the Glasgow Climate Pact. And in doing so, and this is really important, in doing so, the world kept the goal of global temperatures rising no more than 1.5 degrees alive. And at the same time, and this is important for this conference, we also cemented real progress on financing for climate action, adaptation, and on loss and damage. COP26 took great strides in progressing climate change initiatives on a global stage, but I'm really keen to ensure that the benefits from that are actually felt here in Uganda. Uganda, as we all know, is one of the most vulnerable countries in the world to the impacts of climate change. The Ministry of Water and Environment, close partners with us, and whom we will hear from in a moment, estimate that climate change is going to cost Uganda between 3 and 5% of GDP per year by 2050 if no action is taken. And if we're going to effectively tackle climate change, it's going to require every single one of us, every single person in this country, to make significant changes to the way we live and the way that we work. For the UK relationship with Uganda, this means ensuring that our economic partnership drives growth, which is resilient and adapted to climate change for today, but also for tomorrow. And for this reason, the UK has chosen to host the UK-Uganda Virtual Green Growth Conference that you're all very welcome to today. I hope that this conference is really going to build the foundations that will lead to climate-smart economic partnership between Uganda and the UK that generates jobs, enhances innovation, creates opportunities for all Ugandans. And the UK is really ready to support Uganda's green growth journey. We've assisted over 750,000 people to cope with the effects of climate change already. We've delivered 6% of Uganda's national electricity through renewable sources, through private investment facilitated by the UK. We're investing in Lake Victoria Marine Transport, Namamve Industrial Park, solar agriculture, water pumping systems, electric boaters. I could go on and on and on. And we're always looking for the next opportunity to support business, to support communities, to adapt and innovate in a climate smart way. I think what's really key is that often we talk about climate change as a challenge, as something that is negatively going to affect us. And I think it's really important to remember that it also brings opportunities. You know, the UK government, the size of the green growth sector in the UK is £200 billion. This is not a small thing. This is something that brings huge opportunity for people, for their own economic development, and for business as a whole. But, and this is key, Access to climate finance is absolutely crucial for Uganda to succeed in its green growth trajectory. And as a consequence, it was a real focus actually for COP26. And it's why I'm continually promoting the UK's growing blended finance offer, which uses overseas development assistance, concessional financing, including from British international investment, as well as UKEF, UK export financing, to support Uganda's growth, right from smallholder farmers through to large export businesses, and will deliver for the international market, including UK markets. Under the new UK and G7 initiative, Building Back a Better World, the UK is also actively looking to expand and support Uganda to access the investment and build the infrastructure it needs to support green growth. Given the hardships of the last 2 years under the COVID pandemic, it could really be tempting to consider investment options that only deliver short-term benefit or short-term rewards. But I really encourage decision makers present at this conference, but also across Uganda, in the public and in the private sectors, really to consider Uganda's long-term strategic goals when choosing investment partners. And the UK's free, fair and honest trading relationship, I think, puts us in a really strong place to help support with this. The UK is really clear that our commitments are more than words on a page, that we want to deliver on our promises, that it's in all of our self-interest to do precisely that. I'm therefore very pleased to announce that our first new overseas and development aid programme after COP26 is a £39 million programme here in Uganda, 185 billion Ugandan shillings investment over the next 4 years in climate smart jobs here in Uganda. This programme is going to grow climate smart agriculture to create jobs. It's going to provide loans and technical support directly to businesses to enable them to expand into large commercial operations and access mainstream financing. It's going to help them be more resilient to climate change, and it's going to increase incomes for over 300,000 Ugandan households. Supporting climate smart land management systems and services really helps to protect fragile biodiversity that surround agribusinesses in this country. But we're also going to be supporting building climate services that require public investment and delivering hopefully up to an additional £95 million of benefit here in Uganda. Removing barriers that stop businesses getting deals done is a key part of what the UK is here to do in this space, and providing expertise to tackle specific barriers that businesses say make trade and investment more challenging. As I hope you've all heard, UK commitments here in Uganda are more than words on a page. They're real development assistance, making real changes to real people's lives. Our commitment to the people of Uganda remains absolute. We believe that there are huge opportunities from green growth, that making sure that we leverage green financing here in Uganda to make long-term systematic changes for the people of Uganda is a core part of the future relationship between our two countries. So with that, thank you very much for everyone that's attending. I hope you get a lot out of the next couple of days. I hope there's a lot of shared learning from the UK and from Ugandan experts that will be online. And I really look forward to seeing you all again at the end of day 2. Thank you very much indeed.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Kate. And I think you're absolutely right to highlight the the framing of climate change in terms of the challenge, but actually also in terms of the opportunities in Uganda and the UK in terms of jobs, growth, and a whole range of other benefits. And I think one of the purposes of this conference is to really think about how we translate those opportunities into reality, and get as you say, some of those issues that are causing us stumbling blocks at the moment in terms of financing and delivery, how we work together to get those ironed out. I'd like to move on now then to introduce the Honourable Matia Kasaija, the Honourable Finance Minister for the Republic of Uganda, who has prepared a pre-recorded speech for us today. So let me pass over to...
Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is my utmost pleasure to join you at this year's UK-Uganda Green Growth Conference that has been organized by the UK government This conference seeks to reinforce the long-standing partnership between the UK and Uganda in the areas of education, civil service reform, transport, health, the judiciary, defense, and the private sector development. We now have an opportunity to partner in the following 5 new key areas. 1, climate finance. 2, agribusiness. 3, clean energy. 4, clean infrastructure. 5, urban planning. The conference has brought together players from the UK and Uganda private and public sectors to share experience and knowledge on how Uganda can benefit from climate-smart economic growth. Ladies and gentlemen, climate change is no longer a possibility of the future. It is an absolute reality that is now fully upon us. Uganda is highly vulnerable to climate change since its economy and the well-being of its people are tightly bound to the climate-related investments. Following the COVID-19 pandemic that adversely affected the service sector, majority of people, young and old, have turned to agriculture and other natural resource-dependent activities as a means of coping with their survival. This puts additional strain on natural resources and heightened the urgency to enhance sustainable use of natural resources so as to build an economy and a community that is resilient. Amidst these challenges lies a big opportunity, by the way. Microeconomic recovery and stimulus packages must, as a matter of principle, integrate measures to address these environmental and climate issues to spur green, resilience, and inclusive growth for our country. It is on this basis that the government recently launched a Small Business Recovery Fund to provide support to small businesses that have been greatly affected by COVID-19. This support has been channeled through commercial banks and will offer affordable financing to a wide range of businesses, including those that create the green jobs we are aspiring to. Uganda has created an enabling framework for addressing climate change and promoting green growth. The Uganda Green Growth Development Strategy 2017, along with its implementation roadmap, the third National Development Plan, has a fully-fledged program on climate change in addition to mainstreaming it in all other government programs and the National Climate Change Act that strives to optimize the opportunities of Uganda to mobilize enough climate change finances. To further augment the Uganda Green Growth Development Strategy and to address the post-COVID-19 recovery, the country is working on integrated climate resilience and low carbon emission measures into government's climate change long-term strategy that is currently being prepared. An economic analysis of the potential impacts of green growth on Uganda's economy indicate that if green growth interventions are fully implemented, they can boost economic activity worth around 10% of GDP by 2040 compared to businesses as usual, deliver employment up to 4 million jobs, and reduce future greenhouse gases emissions by 28% relative to a conventional growth pathway. Moving forward, we will leverage both public and private financial and human resources that are a key requirement for inclusive socio-economic development and sustainability. I appreciate the support from our partners, including the UK government, through FCDO in facilitating the creation of the climate finance unit in my ministry that will not only increase climate financing to Uganda, but also facilitate green economic development. We therefore look forward to developing and strengthening collaboration to advance the green growth agenda, share latest information and experiences and solutions, while putting emphasis on building and strengthening resilience of the most vulnerable segments of our society. I wish you all fruitful deliberation for God and my country.
So many thanks indeed to the Honourable Minister of Finance of the Republic of Uganda for that message. Again, highlighting the massive opportunities that are available. 10% of GDP by 2040, 4 million jobs. One of the triggers for this conference was the COP conference, COP26 conference, so I'm going to pass over now to Janet Rogan, the regional ambassador, COP26 regional ambassador for Africa and the Middle East. So Janet, are you with us?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Janet.
Fantastic. We had a bit of a challenge this morning. I think there's still a bit of lag on the video. So good morning, everyone. High Commissioner, colleagues, Honourable Minister, PS, invited guests, and those who are joining online. I'm delighted to be with you today, talking from the perspective of COP26 and looking at the green growth agenda in Uganda. Of course, COP26 seems like a long time ago and now back in November, but in fact, it was not just a moment in time as a conference. It's also an ongoing process, and it is the way that we are taking forward all of the commitments that every government in the world made when they were at COP26 back in November, including, of course, the government of Uganda and the government of the United Kingdom. So the difference, I think, that we had from COP26 is that we moved from the promises that the world put together in 2015 at COP21 in Paris, the same year as the Sustainable Development Goals came out, and we looked at the Sendai Disaster Risk Reduction and Resilience framework. And now in COP26, we decided to take it finally into the real implementation mode. And implementation means action. So as the Honourable Minister just set out for us, we see a number of areas where there is real focus. It is, of course, the job of a national government to decide on the national priorities, and it is the job of our partners to come together and see the role in which way we can support and work together in partnership. And I think when we look at the real subject of today and tomorrow's work and this seminar, this meeting, we can see how we are bringing those large-scale global intentions right down into real practical action at the national level. So let me start by thinking a little bit about green versus dirty growth, or maybe we can say traditional or old style or polluting growth. Economic analysis clearly shows that if you spend and invest in tackling climate change and restoring nature, you can generate a larger economic return than on non-green alternatives. People often think that this is all just about talk or it's all just about campaigning, but there is some real hard data behind it. Renewable energy investment generates a positive return of maybe around 1.2 times initially, and remains positive after 5 years. Whereas old style fossil energy investment has the opposite effect, generating a lower return than the original investment and dropping to around half after 5 years. That's really significant when you start to look at the changes we've had in technology, the new prospects that are out there, and the ways we need to grow our economies in a green way. In the same way, investing in nature also generates a positive economic return, and this grows over time, whereas non-green land use investments have the opposite effect. Returns are either negative or neutral. All this makes the case for following a green, low-carbon growth trajectory, especially for a country like Uganda, which has such an abundance of natural resources. When I visited Uganda in October before COP26, I saw for myself the economic partnership between the UK and Uganda on green growth initiatives. One of those I saw was the Nexus Green Solar Irrigation project, where we really saw the transformative effect that bringing a solar energy system in to help alongside water and irrigation can make on small-scale farming. I also saw broader green growth efforts such as the electric Boda Boda company, Boda Work, looking to decarbonize road travel for millions of Ugandans, and at the same time recycle, reuse, upscale what would otherwise have been old, unused lithium batteries. So it had a double effect, which is, I think, is really, really what we look for from new technological solutions into these new areas. We also looked when I visited at climate finance. As part of my visit, the High Commissioner hosted a ministerial roundtable, including representatives from the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Water and Environment, and the Ministry of Energy. And the consensus outcome of the roundtable was the importance of long-term low-carbon development and the need for climate finance to deliver on Uganda's policy ambitions across sectors. I congratulate Uganda on being named a Climate Finance Task Force pioneer country at COP26, partnering with the UK as the anchor donor in this process. If I just say a few words about that, because some of you may not have heard about it, we as COP presidency, we heard a lot from countries about difficulties in accessing climate financing, even though there have already been large amounts of climate financing being made available at the global level. And so we set up a task force specifically to try to help understand where the real problems were for accessing finance and how that could be changed to make it easier both for governments, but also in connection with private sector, and sometimes also for smaller scale civil society organizations to access climate finance. In order to be able to take that work forward, it was agreed at global level that there would be some pioneer countries, and Uganda is one of them. So I'm very pleased about that. Attracting finance relies on bankable projects, as they call them, and a clear national plan. There has to be a prioritization, and the projects have to be clearly worked through with a proper financial track. Publication of Uganda's full nationally determined contribution is due very soon, March or April, and is critical for this. It will sit alongside your National Adaptation Plan and your National Development Plan number 3. An NDC, a Nationally Determined Contribution Implementation Plan, is also an important tool, so I'm very happy to hear this is in development. It sounds like a lot of backroom work to put all of these plans together, but without them, it's very difficult to attract the right new funding. The UK is committed to bringing climate finance to Uganda across all of our investment tools. I think, as the High Commissioner already said very passionately and strongly in her opening, I would like to just reiterate the importance of the new 4-year £39 million programme, which is called Climate Smart Jobs, and is focused on growing climate smart agribusinesses to create jobs, to support climate smart land management and services, and to remove barriers that stop businesses getting deals done. Hopefully, through those elements, we'll actually see some practical impact on the ground during 2022. Why is that important? It's really important for us both as ongoing COP26 presidency up until November, when we hand on to Egypt, who will be the COP27 incoming presidency, and particularly because we want to show that there has been a real implementation impact on the ground during 2022, following COP26, and as we go to Sharm for COP27. It's particularly important for countries like Uganda because COP27 is, in that sense, the COP of Africa. Egypt is hosting on behalf of the Africa Group of Nations, and therefore we expect to see and hope to see that we can encourage progress on the ground in Africa, particularly, as well as the other regions of the world, so that we can demonstrate that this track of green growth, green jobs, nature-based solutions can really be the way forward, and that we will hand on an excellent baton to our colleagues in Egypt, who will take it forward with COP27, and then into COP28 the following year under the leadership of the United Arab Emirates. So I think together we're all really at a very exciting moment in the green growth path after COP26 and going forward into the future. So I really look forward to hearing the outcomes of this conference today, and I wish you all luck in what you're going to discuss. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Janet. I was really struck by your phrase, implementation means action. And we are already doing a lot of things. So the Nexus Green work that you spoke about, and we've got some really great plans in terms of the joint task force with the Ugandan and UK government on access to financing. So let me pass over now to and introduce Sir Dieter Helm, who's a world-leading professor of economic policy at Oxford University, to talk to us about the importance of green growth and how Uganda can benefit, to really kind of frame the discussions for the rest of the day. So let me pass over now. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation to address your conference on green growth. The concept of green growth, as opposed to just economic growth, is pretty recent, but it goes to the heart of the economic transformations that are taking place across Africa today, and in particular in Uganda. At one sense, in one way, it's pretty obvious that any attempt to have growth which isn't green will be unsustainable, and therefore it will not be sustained. And I think it's very, very important in thinking about alternative pathways to prosperity, to economic growth. We think through what not only the opportunities today are, but what the legacy of the economic growth happening now will be in 10, 20, 30, 40 years' time. And how the economies of the world and the context of the world economy into which Uganda plays its crucial part and has many opportunities from, that context is changing quite substantially all around us. It's no longer plausible to pursue an unsustainable path, an ungreen path, and imagine that that's going to leave the population and the society more generally in a decent place. So green growth is, in that sense, a no-brainer. Why wouldn't you do that? Why would you want to create an unsustainable outcome? But that's the easy bit. What I want to do is to contextualize that by thinking about the natural capital approach to growth, and within that context, how climate change fits in, and then some of the opportunities that flow from thinking about growth in those environmental ways. So if you think about any economy, the natural capital, the stuff that nature gives us for free, the endowment that we have from nature, is the basis of all human life on the planet, and it's what underpins all major economic activities. So without decent natural capital, assets in place, there is no clean water, there is no clean energy, there is no biodiversity, there is no ecosystem in the soils to support agriculture. It just is implausible to carry on in a world where the natural capitals are decimated. And the way to think about this is to divide the world up into so-called non-renewable natural capitals, things like minerals, oil, gas, coal, etc., and renewable natural capital, the stuff that nature gives us for free and will go on giving us for free forever, provided we don't exploit the resources beyond that level from which they can reproduce and redeliver themselves to the natural environment. So that distinction is critical when we look at any economic development plans. Mineral-rich economies will want to exploit those gifts from nature, if you like, and when they use them up, they'll be using them for this generation, and the question is whether the proceeds from depleting non-renewable natural resources are going to be there for future generations to benefit from, as well as current. And where there are non-renewable natural capitals, that's a circumstance in which the benefits from those ought to be put into some form of sovereign wealth fund so they can be spread over the generations. And in Africa, there are economies which are highly mineral dependent. And the question in each and every one of those cases is, so what's being set aside for future generations? How much of the profits, or what we would call in economics, the economic rents, are being reinvested for the benefit of the economy generally, and how much are being extracted by particular companies and particular owners? So that's a well understood problem. It can lead to a resource curse in development terms, but at least I think we all know what ought to be done, how such minerals and opportunities should be exploited, and what provision ought to be made to reinvest some of the proceeds. But the difficult bit is the renewable natural capital, of which Uganda has a great deal. This is the stuff, to repeat, that nature gives us for free and keeps on giving, provided we're good stewards of those resources. So think of a fish stock in a lake, think of the biodiversity and richness of rainforests, numerous examples. The fish stock case is the easiest one, just to explain the idea. You can fish and take fish out of that stock, but if you do it prudently, you husband the resources properly, then there'll be fish for the next generation and the generation into the future, indeed forever. And this is why these renewable natural capitals are what we call assets in perpetuity. They go on and on and on delivering their goods, provided we look after them. And that means that we shouldn't be depleting them, cutting them down to deprive future generations of the benefits. On the contrary, a sustainable green growth path is one where proper capital maintenance is done. We carry out our functions as leaseholders rather than freeholders, and we make sure that these assets remain at least as good as we inherited them for future generations. And to put that in context, if we think about agriculture, agriculture depends on lots of things, but primarily the soils. And in most agricultural systems, in most of the world, the soils are simply taken for granted. And where the soils are depleted of their nutrients, then we top up with chemicals, fertilizers, and we use pesticides and so on in abundance. The trouble is that the soils are not just robust to anything we might throw at them. On the contrary, soils have very many characteristics which underpin that agriculture and which are now, in many areas of the world, extremely vulnerable. So the first thing to say about soil is that, in general, it contains about 3 or 4 times the carbon of the atmosphere. And that means that it's a more important carbon sink than what goes on in those concentrations of greenhouse gases in our atmospheres. And the other way of putting this is, if you allow the carbon to be stripped out of the soils, leaving them uncovered, allowing them to erode, not keeping the fabric of that soil in good shape, we're going to contribute enormously to climate change. And of course the corollary is putting carbon back in the soil is a really good policy for addressing climate change. Now, the next thing to say about soils is that whereas we focus on biodiversity above the ground and the biodiversity that underpins all our ecosystems and therefore ultimately all our life systems, including agriculture, actually most biodiversity is beneath your feet. It's in the ground, it's in the soils. And a huge amount of that biodiversity is not yet even known to science. Now, the neat thing is that the amount of carbon in the soil is quite a good proxy for the amount of biodiversity in the soil. So looking after soils, keeping that carbon in those soils, not stripping them out, not leaving them exposed, is good for carbon and good for biodiversity and very good for agriculture. That's a classic example of a positive natural capital policy has multiple payoffs. It also helps to deal with flooding and the soil erosion that goes with flooding, so it's important for water management as well. Now, these assets in perpetuity, are part of the core balance sheet of any economy. And the remarkable thing is that most economies don't even bother to account for them. If we extend that to forestry and particularly rainforests, there is no account which says what the rainforests in Africa are and how they're being properly maintained, just as there is no proper account for the Mekong and all the destruction that's taking place on that, on Southeast Asia, and for the Amazon. But these are global assets, global natural capital, as well as national natural capital. And it's here, in particular, that the whole game or market development around net zero and climate change has its role. So when you think about climate change, do think about all that carbon in the soils, do think about all that carbon locked up in forests, but do also remember that climate change is the outcome of two things. We typically have loads of focus on issues in relation to emissions. That's what was going on in Glasgow at the COP26. Big discussions about what emissions targets people would take on board. Now that's important, and that process continues, and we continue to struggle to find a way in which adding up those emissions will bear down on global warming itself and on that 2 degrees target. But it's not just about emissions. Sequestration, the services that nature provides, is the other half of the equation. So what determines climate change is the concentration of carbon and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Into that atmosphere, we put our emissions, but from that atmosphere, nature takes carbon back out again. And the reason why the climate is what it is because the emissions and sequestration have in the past been in balance, but now, of course, they're not. And that balance is not just caused by burning particularly coal, but fossil fuels and so on. It's also because we've been gradually undermining, in some cases destroying, the ability of natural capital, our vegetation, our oceans, our marine areas, etc., to do the sequestration. So here's a remarkable fact. The Amazon, the greatest rainforest in the world, is now a net emitter of carbon. This great lungs of the world, great green contribution to the equitable nature of our planet and its climate, has gone in the sense of it's in reverse. And what we have is, in agriculture and in lots of the rainforests of the world, Mekong I could quote too, a switch from nature being a healer of our environment, a cleanser of those greenhouse gases, to being a contribution to emissions. This is devastating, and here is another, what I regard as killer fact to add. When we think about reducing emissions, all that discussion at the Glasgow COP, we focus on the idea that if only we would cut emissions, we would limit climate change to 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees. The truth is that even in the worst part of the coronavirus lockdowns, when we shut down an enormous amount of global travel, particularly global aviation, we had large parts of the world's population locked down at home, the biggest reduction in emissions in one short period that could be conceived of that anyone would have ever signed up to do. You know what? In that year, in fact those 2 years, the concentration of carbon in the atmosphere went up another 2 parts per million, as it has done every single year since 1990. So if you ask yourself, how could this possibly be? How could we cut all these emissions and climate change simply march on the same path it's been for the last 30 years? The answer is very simple. It's not all about emissions. It's about the natural capital. It's about sequestration, or rather the failure to sequestrate. I remember my point about soils. Roughly 4 times the carbon of the atmosphere. Who's measuring the emissions from soil? Do you measure in Uganda how much emissions of carbon are coming out of the soils? No. Very few countries measure this. There are some proxies, some attempts, but basically we're not actually measuring all the emissions that are taking place. And for a country like Uganda, with forests and with agriculture, this is a critical component of the total package. So, put this in a positive frame, instead of focusing exclusively on emissions, although we should focus seriously on emissions, if we are to address climate change and some of the really nasty consequences that will flow, particularly in Africa, we have to address sequestration side of the equation. Now, at COP26, as in the previous 25 COPs, a crucial issue was whether the developed countries, the rich countries of the world, would help poorer countries or fast developing countries to follow a industrialization and development process which was not like the ones the developed countries had pursued, and put simply, whether the North would transfer resources to the South to help pay for the transitions that are required. And I have to say that although there are some helpful bits in the COP26 agreement, the climate fund as a whole, which is supposed to be 100 billion per annum, is incredibly small relative to the challenges China, but particularly India and Africa, and what it would cost to change the development models for those countries. And the forestry deal of 14 billion per annum, half private, half public, is small against the totality of the challenges ahead and the contribution that in this particular case forestry can make to helping to mitigate climate change. To put it in perspective, the promised 100 billion per annum is just a repeat of what's gone before, and the 100 billion that's promised has turned out to be about 75 billion per annum. Now that's about equal to the annual dividend of Saudi Aramco, the largest oil company in the world. That scale will have to improve. And on forestry, it's the same number as before, and the pledge to stop the destruction of forests doesn't actually kick in until 2030. Now, you could look at this and say, okay, nobody's serious about climate change, we'll just carry on as we are. But you could look around it the other way. Over the next decade or two, right through to 2050, as the climate change problem becomes more serious, these numbers are almost certain to increase. In the meantime, in addition to the direct governmental funding of projects to help protect economies and help the sequestration process, there's the private sector. And many of the world's largest companies have now pledged that they're going to be net zero by 2050. Now, we all know that pledging to do something in 29 years' time is very different from actually doing it. But the reality is that most of these private companies are now being held to account by the media, by their shareholders, and indeed by governments too. And accounting frameworks and so on are being put in place to see how well they're living up to their commitments. For most large companies, it is impossible to get their emissions to zero. And that means that they have to try to offset some of those hard to reduce emissions, and they do that by buying offsets. They pay other countries, other people, other businesses to do sequestration emissions reductions in exchange for being able then to set those against their own emissions so that they can meet their own net zero target. So that's the challenge out there, how to mobilise the opportunities to increase sequestration of carbon in countries like Uganda, how to get paid to do it in a way that's credible and is surrounded by good governance, so that where many of these projects, like, for example, planting more trees, take time, the buyer can be assured that the seller is actually going to deliver what they promise. And there has to be in place robust mechanisms to deal with what happens when things go wrong. And they surely do. You can't be certain what will happen to forestry now in 25 years' time. Who knows what climate change itself will do to those opportunities? Who knows how well the sequestration will be protected from grazing, from other intrusions? But the opportunity here for good governance, for clear offsetting permitting, for abiding by international standards, by being open to scrutiny, is that revenue flow. And that in itself will improve the welfare of people at home, because a good natural environment is extremely good for the agriculture, for the water, and indeed for physical and mental health as well on top, and to provide the lungs for the fast-growing cities of Africa. So this is a big opportunity, and it should not be wasted. Now, in addition to that, there are steps to pay people not to destroy natural capital. So this isn't additional sequestration of carbon. This is preventing emissions from taking place by the destruction of rainforest over time, by unsustainable agricultural practice, etc. Here it's more tricky. There's a question of what the baseline is, what the starting line is, and how, again, you work out whether or not the monies that are being spent are delivering the outcomes which are promised. And you also have to deal quite carefully with perverse incentives. If you know that someone's going to pay you not to destroy things, then sometimes it's quite economically attractive in the very short term to do more destruction than otherwise would have been the case. That indeed has happened in a number of examples in Europe and in the United States, and those perverse incentives have to be thought through. And they matter because credibility is everything in this game. As soon as a country becomes non-credible, plays games with these schemes to protect nature and to enhance carbon offsetting, they become a pariah in the markets. People turn their backs and the capital flows stop. And it's similarly the case with the 14 billion for forestry. Reputation is everything in this game. So if you look forward, it's not just the case that not being green and not having green growth will undermine the very basis of the Ugandan economy and other African economies. It's also that huge numbers of opportunities will be missed, and, to put it bluntly, the money that goes with that. So by embracing green growth, not only will the people of Uganda inherit in the future assets at least as good as the people now have, but there's every opportunity to have better green assets, to grow the balance sheet and to grow the revenues with that, and therefore you get a win-win outcome. More international funding flows and a better outcome for the people of Uganda. In the end, what's not to like about that? And even more so, when you compare it with the alternative, unsustainable economic growth that is not sustained, and the risks to the population in 20, 30 years' time of having a degraded agriculture, degraded soils, degraded forests. Who would want to have that? What's to like about that? That is a legacy that no generation should pass on to the next. So opportunities abound. This is a rich seam of potential development for Uganda, and it's also a rich seam of potential funding from the private sector as well as from governments. And that's part and parcel of a proper north-south arrangement, which goes back to the Brundtland report and should be at the heart of any international climate change discussions going forward. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much indeed, Sir Dieter. I mean, I think that was an absolutely masterful framing, literally from the ground up, kind of starting with the importance of soil. But I learned a lot about the kind of the balance between sequestration and emissions. But I was also really struck by the kind of the win-wins and, you know, for example, the carbon levels in the soil and the benefits of that for the environment, but actually also the benefits of that for agriculture, agribusiness and growth. I think within the win-wins also, I was struck by the opportunities for Uganda. There are genuinely new markets emerging globally where countries can sell things that they previously were not able to sell. And one great example of that Sir Dieter raised was the sequestration market. And a country like Uganda, given its kind of biodiversity, given its climate, is a great place potentially for both private sector and public sector to be involved in that. The other thing though that wasn't lost on I'm sure all of us was the scale of the challenge and the need for financing. And you know, we're going to come on to that in our next session starting at 12:30 and looking at the importance of climate financing, including the £39 million Climate Smart Job programme that Kate announced this morning. The full itinerary for the conference is on the website, and it'll be displayed during the interval between this plenary and the start of the next. So I hope you can remain with us for that. So we'll be moving on to discuss how to create bankable projects that access UK investment, speaking directly to the issues raised by many this morning on the importance of financing. But just on the remainder of this session, it reminds me to just thank the British High Commissioner, to thank Janet Rogan, and to thank Sadita for an excellent set of interventions, some really thought-provoking remarks from all. And I hope to see you all in a few minutes as we start on our climate financing session. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mitigating climate change is really at the core of what we do at Mkupa. While we're a financing company, we see financing for consumers as a critical enabler for allowing customers to switch from potentially harmful uses of energy to more renewable ones. We have done this historically with our solar home systems and look forward to doing it with other kinds of devices like electric motorbikes or electric cars. So really we see financing for consumers as an important enabler in allowing consumers globally to move from harmful power sources or not energy efficient appliances to more renewable energy sources.
Across Africa, smallholder farmers supply products into local and international markets. But most smallholder farmers lack access to resources to improve their productivity and incomes. As a long-term investor with over 50 investments across the African continent, AgDevco is well placed to help connect agribusinesses and smallholder farmers in ways that deliver benefits for all involved. We provide long-term flexible capital to growing agribusinesses, and we can mobilize soft funding to support technical assistance programs. Through our Smallholder Development Unit, under a 5-year program supported by the MasterCard Foundation and the UK government, we have helped agribusinesses engage smallholders more effectively as suppliers and customers. This work will be continued through AgDevco's Technical Assistance Facility, which shares best practice and other lessons learned from over a decade of investing in Africa. We have invested in commercial agribusinesses in East, Southern, and West Africa that have linked hundreds of thousands of farmers to markets, of whom 37% are women. In northern Uganda, we have provided working capital to the Gulu Agricultural Development Company, GADC. GADC is revitalizing the region's economy, buying organic cotton, sesame, and chilies from 30,000 smallholder producers.
Through the support of AgDevco, farmers were trained in good agronomic practices using video-based trainings, which benefited a lot of female farmers in our network.
Over the next decade, we plan to double our investment portfolio and to continue to support our investees with technical assistance. We invest to create commercially sustainable agribusinesses that help improve the livelihoods and resilience of thousands of smallholder farmers and employees. That's how we transform African agriculture to benefit both people and planet.
farmers around us here have no access to electricity, no access to clean cooking fuel, and no access to milling. So to mill their rice and groundnuts and maize, they have to drive miles away to Gulu. They have to pay for transport, they have to pay for storage and accommodation.
Mandulis is an electricity company that uniquely also provides agricultural value addition.
So welcome back everyone. For people who weren't in the first session, I'm Andrew Ockenden. I'm the Development Director for the British High Commission in Kampala, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this session on how to create bankable projects that access UK investment. So in the previous session, I think throughout COP, it was highlighted how important, how central financing is to actually turning implementation into action, as Janet Rogan said this morning, on climate change. So in this session, we're going to hear from both sides of the market. We're going to hear from the UK investment vehicles that provide climate finance to projects, including here in Uganda. But we're also going to hear from companies that have successfully accessed this finance to develop green and climate resilient organisations. So they're going to be sharing with us some sort of tips and hints on how to make kind of bankable projects. And then we are hoping to move swiftly through the agenda to allow a chance for people to ask questions. As I said at the beginning, it'd be really great to draw on the expertise from all of the delegates who are joining us here in the room and remotely, to several of the investment vehicles, and also to the Ministry of Finance here in Uganda, who've kindly agreed to join us for this session. So, with no further ado, I'd really like just to introduce Louis Dane, who is the economist for the British High Commission in Kampala, and he will be leading this session. So I will pass over to Louis, and thank you very much. I hope you have a great session.
Thank you so much, Andrew, and thank you to everyone who's joining us today online. We're sorry we couldn't have you here in person, but thank you so much for joining. Climate finance, as we've heard earlier, is such an important topic for Uganda's green growth journey that we're really pleased that you're able to join us to discuss the two aspects that we'll be covering in this session. Firstly, what is the UK offer on climate finance? And secondly, what do businesses here in Uganda need to do to access this finance? And I'm lucky to be joined here today by a distinguished panel of guests, including Ivan and Juan, who'll be joining, who'll be speaking later on in the session. So what will the session cover? Well, the first half of the session, which will be an hour and a half, we'll hear from the UK investment vehicles which provide climate finance to firms in Uganda and other countries, and we'll also be hearing from companies who have accessed this climate finance. The four investment vehicles that we'll be hearing from are the Private Infrastructure Development Group, the CDC Group, which will soon be called the British International Investment, BII, AgDevco, and UK Export Finance. In the second half of the session, we'll move on to a panel discussion. So please, during the session, do pop your questions in the comment bar, and my colleague will feed them through, and we'll ask some of those questions to the panel in the second half of the hour and a half session. Now, just to recap the context, climate finance was a key focus of the COP22 meeting in Glasgow in November 2021. But what exactly is climate finance? It's really any private or public financing which helps fund mitigation and adaptation to the effects of climate change. Now, that can be many different things. It can be public funding, which would typically go into infrastructure projects, or, and importantly, it's also private financing, which can help fund things like technology, capital investments, and also working capital to help businesses mitigate emissions and adapt to the impacts of climate change. And this funding can flow from a number of sources. It can be international, north-south investment, as we heard Sadita talking about earlier, but it can also be local funding, it can be national funding, and it can take many forms. It can be the forms of loans, guarantees, export credits, and grants. So public finance comes in many different forms. Now, talking about the UK offer specifically, the UK's climate finance offer is known as ICF, International Climate Finance. It covers a very wide range of areas. We'll hear during this conference about how it covers energy, agribusiness, and infrastructure and smart cities. Now, climate and biodiversity is the top UK international priority, and therefore we work very carefully with a number of partners on capacity building, access to technology, and importantly, access to finance to fund investments which will help mitigation and adaptation. The UK's ICF funding, that's UK aid, is worth £11.6 billion over 5 years. That's 55 trillion Ugandan shillings, and that will grow by an extra £1 billion if the UK economy grows as expected, And the CDC target, which we'll hear about today, is to provide another $2 billion of climate finance in the next 5 years. But it's important to remember that while the programs, which we heard the High Commissioner announce earlier, UK Climate Jobs Programme, 39 million over 4 years, those aid programs are important. As Sadita mentioned, this is not perhaps sufficient to cover all of the needs for climate change mitigation and adaptation. And it's important to bring in private sector investment. Now that's why I'm so pleased today to be joined by the UK's investment vehicles, which sit somewhere between the two. These are institutions and vehicles which are capitalised by the UK government and have objectives set by the UK government, trying to provide funding to transformative businesses in countries like Uganda, which are on a sustainable path to help countries like Uganda on its green growth journey. But they also act like a private investor, providing concessional finance, technical assistance. So, you know, they are concessional in nature some of the time, but most importantly, a return on that investment is expected. And therefore, you know, their insights on what companies need to do to attract their investment has wider applicability to what companies need to do here in Uganda to attract investment to facilitate green growth. So, we'll be providing in this session information on what the UK investment vehicles are and hearing from businesses on the key steps they took to be investment ready to develop bankable projects, which is the phrase you'll be hearing a lot during the next hour and a half. So, without further ado, I'll hand over to my colleague Tim Streeter, who's online, who's Head of Investor Relations at PIDG, who will then pass over to his colleague Wazikazi Fedana, the Transaction Manager at Emerging Africa Infrastructure Fund. So over to you, Tim, online. Thank you.
Thank you, Louis, and thank you very much for the opportunity to present to all the honoured guests today. A few words about the Private Infrastructure Development Group, first of all, before we get on to looking at the projects, a couple of projects themselves, because that's what this session is all about. So the Private Infrastructure Development Group was set up 20 years ago by 4 governments at that time. The UK has always been our anchor investor. It's the largest and most active participant in PIDG. And as our name suggests, our work is focused only on developing infrastructure projects across sub-Saharan Africa and throughout South and Southeast Asia, and thereby, you know, contribute to the attainment of the SDGs. And obviously, tackling the climate challenge is at the forefront of that. The infrastructure projects that we help to develop and finance are always sustainable, accessible, they alleviate poverty, generate positive impact, and lasting market transformation lies at the heart of our work. And we all heard, maybe in the opening comments from the Honourable Finance Minister, that infrastructure in Uganda is one of the priority areas. If I could just ask, can we go to the presentation slides? And on the right-hand side, you can see that over those 20 years, we've committed 4.4 billion of commitments to infrastructure projects. And that has mobilized 35.3 billion of investment from other sources, of which 22 billion has come from the private sector into those projects. So it just demonstrates the success that we've had and the effectiveness our instruments have in crowding in and mobilizing, de-risking projects and bringing in that all-important private sector money if we're going to achieve those SDGs. And blended finance is obviously something that the High Commissioner referred to at the start when she made her opening remarks as well. In Uganda, we have intervened in 11 projects. We've committed 134 million, principally in the power sector, and that has mobilized 500 million of commitments from other sources as well. And all of those projects have been climate aligned, and power obviously lies at the core of those projects, because power is a critical enabler of economic development. If we could move on to the next slide, please. I'd like to lift the lid on the delivery mechanisms that we have throughout the PIDG group, because as the name suggests again, PIDGE is a group of companies. So we can provide, the critical point here is that we can provide assistance at every stage of an infrastructure project's life cycle and over the entire capital structure. We can provide grants through our technical assistance arm, and that helps fund sometimes feasibility studies or advisory work. Infraco Africa, or in this case, can commit early stage equity investment, and that is critical in de-risking infrastructure projects, and we'll hear from an example of that in a minute. The project being Zembo Bikes in Uganda. And infrastructure projects at a certain time in their life cycle also require debt financing as they scale up and enter into the operational phase. And we can provide that through two different delivery mechanisms, one being the Emerging Africa Infrastructure Fund. They've actually been used in every single intervention that we've made in Uganda in the power sector, or through Garanco. And Garanco can provide local government guarantees, local currency guarantees, and help unlock financing from local players such as the banks. And through these instruments, we can work over the life cycle of an infrastructure project and help with that all-important de-risking. So with that, maybe I could hand over to my colleague Luazi, who works in the Emerging Africa Infrastructure Fund, and we'd like to unpick how we assisted and how we helped finance the Kigagati power project. So can we move on to the next slide and hand over to Luazi?
Good afternoon, everybody. So I work on the Emerging Africa Infrastructure Fund side, and we have been focused on Uganda for a number of years now. And the performance of the electricity supply industry in Uganda, as we've seen, has steadily improved for the last 10 years. With more private sector participation, as well as the government of Uganda investing more. There's been an increase in generation capacity, most importantly, from installed capacity approximately rising from 400 megawatts in the early 2000s to triple to date. We believe this growth has been largely due to smaller renewable energy projects, such as Kigagati, and some larger ones reaching COD. The generation capacity of all hydro plants is very dependent on seasonal rainfall, and we continue to monitor the hydrological risk associated with this. However, despite all the low electrification rates of 22% and 33% in Uganda and Tanzania, respectively, and even lower in the rural areas at numbers around 11% at 17%, and also taking into account Uganda experiencing load shedding due to lack of sufficient generation pre-2012. It's eased since then because of also larger hydropower plants commissioning. So we are happy to see that Uganda is enjoying a bit of stable supply due to these smaller and larger power plants. And understand it's a growing economy, and it needs investment, and it suffered from underinvestment previously. Kigagati was funded by Emerging Africa Infrastructure Fund, that is AIF, and as well as FMO, on a 50-50 basis of debt financing at $27 million each. Kigagati is a 16 megawatt greenfield run-on-the-river hydroelectric plant, and we're happy that early December last year in 2021, the plant commissioned and reached deemed COD, and it was certified by an independent engineer. So this plant is built on the Kagera River, and it forms the natural border between Uganda and Tanzania. All electricity produced by Kikagati will be sold to the Uganda Electricity Transmission Company, known as UETCL. And 50% of this electricity will be on-sold by UETCL to TANESCO, which is the Tanzania state utility. And this commercial and legal arrangement between UETCL and TANESCO is documented in a power sharing and sales agreement, as well as a bilateral agreement between both countries that they have signed. And this project also benefits from a subsidy under the KfW Get Fit program. PIDGE, through its technical assistance facility that Tim touched on earlier, we know very well as TAF, provided a facility earlier on to Kikagati for development costs, as well as during the sad time of COVID-19, they granted some funding last year. The grants really target infrastructure projects like these, which are in need and are economically viable in the long term, but require some initial funding for commercial viability later on and to be acquired by private sector investors. Kikagati, of course, is a cross-border project, which adds complexity to construction and operation. And yes, indeed, it's been a difficult construction process, but nonetheless, it's come to fruition. We did anticipate this as well because it's normal for low-head hydropower plants. And the project costs have also been relatively high which in comparison to small hydropower projects in Uganda for various reasons, just to name three. As mentioned earlier, because the project is in the Kagera River, it has a very high flow, making construction challenging and leading to slow construction processes, and also having to build several interim structures on site. Secondly, we have to be cognizant of the environmental risks with such projects and have to be addressed, such as the aquatic bypass and fish ladder. And lastly, but mainly, COVID-19 disrupted all aspects of construction, including staff healthcare and logistics at large. From an impact point of view, we're proud that Kikagati adds green and clean energy at a low cost, generation capacity in the country. The project will generate enough power for over 800 people to consume. And now that it's operational, it will help in reducing overall carbon emissions. The remote location of Kikagati and parallel investments in the transmission and distribution network by UETCL in the vicinity is likely to also result in electrification of nearby villages in and around the plant. Skills also have been transferred from the expats that worked on the plant and are still working on the plant, and other local staff that have been trained by the sponsor at other plants in Uganda to local communities around Kikagati. This will also result in additional businesses and households with access to power and improved services for existing users. And there's been employment and generation during the construction period, and now hoping more and during the operations of the plant. It is a landmark project, which we are indeed proud of, and it was delivered in very challenging circumstances. And we are happy it's reached commercial operations and passing commissioning tests successfully, and will continue to support the project as we go along. Outside Kikagati, we remain positive on Uganda as a country in general and its power sector. And we continue to support, bankable projects. So including Kikagati, We've got a wide range of projects that we've invested in this country, projects up to, in total, a commitment size of just close to $100 million US, and namely that's Access Uganda, a solar plant, Achwa, Bugoye, Elgon City 1 and 2, Kalangala Infrastructure Services, Lobelia, Kawembe Hydro, as well as Tororo Solar. And we look forward to doing a little bit more should the supply obviously allow. And I thank you. I think I'll hand over to my colleague, Etienne.
Hello, I hope everybody's hearing me. I'm Etienne from the company Zembo Electric Motorcycles. So at Zembo, we are a small Ugandan company, and we do electric motorcycles for Boda Boda drivers. We have two activities. On one hand, we sell electric motorcycles to Boda drivers. We sell them on credit, and after 2 years, drivers become owner of their bike. And on the other hand, we sell the battery swap service, meaning that drivers don't own the battery, but we supply a battery for free. And when the battery is empty, drivers swap their empty battery against a recharged one, and they pay a fee for each battery swap. So to summarize, we sell the motorcycles, the electric motorcycle, and our objective is that every Boda drivers in Uganda switch to electric. And on the other hand, we provide the battery swap service. We have major impacts, both social and environmental. Socially, drivers increase their revenue by 60%, notably because drivers don't have maintenance costs, or much lower maintenance costs, and energy costs are also lower. On the other hand, environmentally, we reduce CO2, about 2 tons per bike and per year of less CO2 emissions, and fine particles, which is super important for African cities, which are very polluted, notably Kampala. So the reduction of fine particles is between 95 and 100% of reduction. To do this, we have to sell the motorcycles, but we also have to build the network of stations where driver can swap their batteries. We currently have 30 stations in Kampala and towards Masaka, up to Masaka, so that drivers have a dense network and an area where they can operate. This is a very capital-intensive model. To give you an idea, we need about $3,000 for each bike that we put on the field to invest on the motorcycle, on the batteries, and on the network of stations. In Uganda, we have about 700,000 bikes. So the investment needed to switch every motorcycle to electric is around $2 billion. This is a huge investment. Zembo will not be the only one to do it. But to give you an idea, we are speaking here only about transitioning towards e-mobility for motorcycles, and we are already speaking about $2 billion. This very capital-intensive model needs investment, and we are thankful to have Infraco Africa on board now. They invested in Zembo at the end of last year, together with DOB, which is a family office in the Netherlands, and Mobility 54, which is Toyota investment branch in Africa. I would like to share a few words about our experience with Infraco, because I think this is the topic of the conference today. Infraco, we had a lot of discussion, and it took time to convince them and to land on a deal with Infraco, and we are now very happy to have them on board. What we appreciated at Infraco is that their objective is, sorry, not only to be a DFI, but to take risk together with the companies to co-develop the projects and to be involved in the company's life. E-mobility in Africa is a new topic. It's a nascent world. We don't have a lot of companies doing e-mobility in Africa. And we needed people able to take this risk and to be one of the first to invest in this new sector. Sorry. So we really appreciated that. I also would like to insist on the fact that making objectives fit between a large institution like Page or Infraco Africa and a small company like Zembo needs effort on both sides, because obviously we don't have the same kind of organization, and not all objectives are aligned. And here I would like to thank Infraco Africa to have understood that and to have been able to align or to help us meet the requirements and the expectation. And on the other hand, to understand that a small company cannot do everything from scratch and needs time and have an action plan to develop a project like this. Finally, on the country's impact, and to give you a bit of ideas or a bit of numbers, I will finish on this. One motorcycle needs about 6 kilowatt hours of electricity per day. For all bikes in Uganda, we are speaking about 1.5 gigawatt hours per year. This is a very significant amount of electricity for a country like Uganda. And I would like to insist on the fact that this cannot be done without the government, without the government support, without the involvement of ministries in this. And we are very open to discuss that. We have already started discussion with the Ministry of Energy, the Ministry of Technology. We participated to a parade last year on this. So we feel that there is a positive feedback and positive action from the government, and we are happy and interested to continue the discussion and to make them deeper so that e-mobility can really grow in this country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tim, Loisy, and Etienne. Thank you. That was really insightful. We'll now move swiftly on. I'm now going to hear from Ellen Brooks and Juan, who sat next to me, about the CDC group and how they support in companies looking to grow in Uganda. And I'll just ask the speakers to please try and stick to 5 minutes, because we're really keen to move on to the panel discussion promptly. So thank you very much. Over to you, Ellen.
Great, thank you for that introduction, and it's brilliant to be with you all today. And apologies, I'm not actually there in the room, but looking forward to the rest of the discussion. So I really want to give you a very brief overview of what CDC Group does. And as noted, we are soon to change our name to British International Investments, or BII. So what we're doing and why we're particularly interested in climate finance. So we are the UK's development finance institution, and we have been investing for impact and financial returns for over 70 years. And that's very much what we're doing as we step forward into our new 5-year strategy. We invest across South Asia and Africa, and I will touch on in a minute our investments in Uganda. But we invest via a range of financial products. So we invest debt and equity directly into companies, but we also invest via funds and financial institutions. I think this is particularly important when we're looking to support earlier stage businesses, which is important for the innovation that we need for climate finance. We have at the moment $9 billion under management. And as I mentioned, we're just stepping into our new 5-year strategy, which really has a focus around 3 pillars that we're investing for: inclusivity, sustainability, and productivity. And they're the 3 kind of impact outcomes that we as an institution are hugely motivated by. And I guess the theme of this conference and what I'll pick up on is sustainability and what that means in terms of climate finance. So I'm in CDC's climate change team and work particularly with a focus on climate finance delivery across the organisation. And since we launched our climate change strategy in 2020, where we committed to align the whole of our operations to the goals of the Paris Agreement, we've also increased our focus on climate finance. And in our new 5-year strategy, that means that 30% of our future commitments will be in climate finance, at least 30%, and that over 5 years totals up to $3 billion US, which for us is a real increase in the amount of climate finance we're looking to commit. And hopefully that sends a positive signal to the market that we are really passionate and interested in supporting climate finance qualifying businesses. So what does that look like in the Ugandan context? Well, I'm going to touch on 2 investments, but we have over 50 investments in Uganda, but 2 to note. So the first is Bujagali Power Station, which I'm sure we're all familiar with, a 250 megawatt hydropower plant, which we've been invested in since 2018. And the second one, which I'm delighted that Francisco de Rashid is in the panel today, can talk more to, is M-Copper, which is one of our great solar home system companies, really pioneering this very important sector for energy access. And so I think that just gives us a little quick flavour of the types of climate finance CDC's already invested into, and definitely we see much opportunity to do more of this going forward. I think we've heard a lot today about infrastructure as climate finance, which is hugely important to support the energy transition. But in my final point, I'd like to make the point that we need to support all sectors of the economy to not only decarbonise, but also to build resilience to the climate risks that we know we're already facing at 1 degree of warming and will continue to face. And so infrastructure is a huge part of that. But CDC also invests in sectors such as agriculture, manufacturing, and telecoms. And so we also look to deliver climate finance across these sectors, as well as via our investments in financial institutions. And so I am hopeful and excited about the opportunity for CDC to partner with Ugandan businesses to deliver climate finance, both adaptation and mitigation across all areas of the economy. And I'll be around later for questions and happy to dive into more details on this. But I think this would be a good moment for me to hand over to Juan to talk a bit more about M-Copper.
Hi, good afternoon. So my name is Juan de Francisco Rashid, and I'm the General Manager for M-Copper Uganda. I'll give a brief overview about M-Copper and then in general, and then I'll talk a little bit about M-Copper's experience in Uganda. So M-Copper was started about 12 years ago by essentially the people who started M-Pesa in Kenya. For those who don't know, M-Pesa is a mobile money service that is wildly popular and has taken off in Kenya. And essentially what happened was after founding M-Pesa, the founders realized that M-Pesa would almost be like the internet, a platform on which other businesses could grow. And so what the founders of M-Copper found is that a lot of people in Kenya, at least, were excluded from the energy sector. And often if they're excluded from the energy sector, they would also be excluded from the financial sector. So the typical rural family would be spending about 50 cents a day on very poor quality forms of energy. Typically this would be kerosene, batteries, and disposable lights. And so what if you could take that 50 cent expenditure per day and try and do something a little bit more productive, a little bit more efficient, and a little bit cleaner than spending it on kerosene, which at the end of the year, the family has very little to show for. And so just like other companies have done with the unitization of other products, a good example is the unitization of shampoo into small packets, we basically did that with clean energy. So we took the same expenditure that a family would spend on poor quality forms of energy, and instead of putting it towards kerosene, you'd put it towards solar. M-Pesa allowed us to collect money from families who, by definition, are difficult to access without having to send people to their homes to collect money. So we're able to collect affordably. That, coupled with the ability to lock these solar home systems remotely, meant that we didn't have to take collateral from these families. And asking for collateral from a family that's already poor and already excluded from the financial system is something that's very challenging. And yet, unfortunately, that is the way that most finance works in this part of the world. So you're able to go to a family that's already spending money and say, look, you can displace the money you're already spending and put it towards clean energy. And at the end of the year, you will own the solar home system outright, and you can use it for the rest of the product's life. This is a very, very powerful proposition that we were able to present to individuals. The other thing we were able to do is, as a family is paying off the solar system, they would also develop a credit history with us. And we would pass this on to the Credit Reference Bureau so that they're able to access loans from us, but also loans from other companies. So that was about 12 years ago that we set this up. 12 years later, we have successfully managed to sell well over 1 million solar home systems, which means about 5 million people are being able to use clean energy as a result of our work in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Ghana, and Nigeria. And we were very lucky to be able to be supported by the United Kingdom in this with two forms of financing. In the earlier stages, we had concessionary financing from DFID, who supported us in the early development of these solar home systems that we were able to lock remotely. And later on, CDC came on as one of our top investors. And one of the things that I've seen personally from having been in the board meetings with CDC is they bring not just finance in terms of money, but also a lot of experience from having invested in other companies across Africa. So as you know, formerly before I came to Uganda, I was helping with our international expansion. So before we went to the DRC, before we went to Nigeria, before we went to Ethiopia, CDC was very much one of the ones who was connecting us with local players in those countries so that we could try and understand whether or not that's a market we wanted to expand into. So that's it in terms of M-KOPA as a whole. I'll speak a little bit now about M-KOPA in Uganda. We opened here in 2013. We started making our sales in eastern Uganda, and since then we've done 135,000 solar home systems in this country. We employ about 300 full-time employees, and we support about 2,000 field technicians and sales agents that go from border to border across the country. We're very much operating in every sector, in every geography of this country. We have had a lot of struggles though, and so I think M-KOPA is a success story in some senses, but also a cautionary tale about some of the challenges that come with trying to do business here. In 2015, the Ugandan shilling had a very serious devaluation, and for us that's pretty significant because the average solar home system takes 1 to 3 years for a customer to pay off, which means that we are exposed to any changes in the Ugandan shilling because we are paying our suppliers in dollars, but our customers are paying us in Ugandan shillings. So the devaluation in 2015 caused us to have to increase our prices, which was a serious challenge to being relevant in this extremely price-sensitive market. In 2017, we were hit by a second factor, which is the VAT introduction on solar home systems. And I think this is a classic example of where one part of the government wants to have more solar home systems, but the other part needs to collect revenue, and that is the reality. So the introduction of VAT instantly meant that we had to increase prices because our margins were pretty slim at best, and so this had to be passed on straight to the customer. Again, and I said it's a very price-sensitive market, so the moment you do that, your sales volumes decrease. So the Ugandan shilling devaluation and the introduction of VAT meant our prices had to increase. This caused severe challenges. It meant that, for example, we had to reduce our presence in the northern region because the lower affordability in the north meant that the repayments were not sufficient for us to be able to make the margins we needed to be able to sustain our business. Now, we would love to be able to sell more in the north because that is actually one of the areas that needs solar the most, but it has been too difficult to be able to do business there. Having said that, finance can help here. So in order for our business to be successful, we have to incur costs of sales, product, service, finance, and bad debt. All of those are areas where financing can come and support, and it has supported. So for example, financing helped us develop a solar-powered fridge, which is one of those products that is able to provide clean energy to people because they're able to use solar to power a fridge, but also has an incredible social benefit we found that families were able to reduce their cost of food expenditure by 1/3 and reduce the amount of time they spent going to a market by 1/3 again, which is a significant social benefit that actually disproportionately favors helping women, which is something that we support. So financing, and in this case it was concessionary financing, helped us develop this new product. Financing has also helped us expand into areas where we might not otherwise have been able to go. But I think that's probably all I have time for. Thanks, happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Juan. Again, it's another great example of a company which have made the most of their UK financing offer, even if it's not without its challenges. Clearly that access to finance and that expertise has really helped your company. So thank you for being here today to share your experience. I'll now hand over to Ivan Senyonjo, who will talk about AgDevco, which is another UK investment vehicle working particularly in agriculture. Over to you, Ivan.
Thank you, Louis. Good afternoon. A brief introduction about AgDevco. AgDevco is a specialist agribusiness investor. We work with agribusinesses, providing capital to them. Our product range is anywhere between debt, a blend of debt and equity. We generally provide long-term capital to businesses, and we are active currently in 8 countries. Our portfolio currently is about 43 businesses across these 8 countries, with a portfolio value of about $150 million. Generally, in Uganda, we came through funding from the UK government under the NUTEC program, and we focused on providing capital to businesses that at the time had linkages to the economy of northern Uganda. What that meant is that we looked at those businesses that would provide either jobs or some form of sustainability in terms of resource usage from northern Uganda or into northern Uganda. And therefore, when we did that, we looked at a couple of businesses, including the one that will come after me, the business that will speak after me, which we found to be impactful in terms of the number of farmers that their activities touched. So how we define our impact for us is that these businesses that we support should be able to either source for inputs from smallholder farmers or provide a solution to the smallholder farmers within the areas where they work. And in northern Uganda, this was a key criteria that we were using and we continue to use in looking at businesses that come to us for capital. Our ticket size ranges between $2 million and $10 million for any one investment. But what distinguishes us largely is the fact that while we're commercial, we also like to make sure that we provide solutions that the ordinarily traditional providers of capital, for example, the typical commercial banks, would not ordinarily provide to businesses. We will work with businesses that have limitations, for example, of security, even though we do take security, but it's not like that would stop us from working with a business if it is a good business that is impactful and transformative in terms of the communities where it works. So that is one of the key differentiating factor for AgDevco that we use in all the countries where we work. In addition to that, our criteria in looking at investments covers a number of things, including issues of gender, issues of climate change. So we in our evaluation of businesses, these are issues that we take considerable interest into. That doesn't mean that we would not work with a business that is currently challenged in terms of climate change. Yes, we will work with them with a view that will help them to move towards sustainability the moment we start engaging with them. And to date, across our portfolio, we have reached over 500,000 smallholder farmers through the various businesses that we work with, and have provided over $150 million in capital to different businesses across the 8 different countries where we are currently active. I don't want to continue. I would like to stop there.
Thanks so much, Ivan. It will be good to hear from Bruce now, who I think is on the line, who's one of the companies from Gulu Agricultural Development Company who've been invested in by AgDevco. So if you're on the line, Bruce, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks. Ironically, we have a power cut in South Africa, so if my connection is not great, I apologize. So I'm with the founder and MD of Gulu Agricultural Development Company. We have operations in Gulu, Kitgum, and Ranakam in northern Uganda. We operate entirely in northern Uganda. We started in 2009 from basically a zero base, and we have grown fast. We now export 10,000 tons on average of cotton and sesame to Europe. Each year. That's about 600 containers of product each year. We buy from around about 60,000 smallholder farmers east of Choli, Karenga, so basically across northern Uganda from the Congo border to the Kenyan border. We pay in cash approximately $12 million, so about sort of 40 billion shillings of cash into farmers' hands each year as a crop. So the development impact of the company is huge, as you can imagine, because that cash is then used for paying school fees, clinic bills, etc. AgDevco have been incredibly supportive. They've grown with us. They've been supportive every inch of the way, and I can't stress how much they've been integral to our growth and the development of northern Uganda. There are a couple of things that strike me just listening to these conversations. The one is we're often, as people involved in agriculture, we are asked or told about the natural progression from smallholder or peasant agriculture that's generally sort of frowned upon. And we're told, no, your farmers need to be more commercial. What's the plan? What's the future? And the future is sort of almost assumed to be commercial agriculture. So, people, development companies, governments, agencies, they want to see those scenes that we saw in some of the slides at the beginning of the presentation with large, massive monocultures of maize, beans, whatever it is. I think that progression in Uganda would be an absolute disaster. I think Uganda is unique in having about 85% of its population deriving its primary income from peasant agriculture. I think if you had to go for mass commercialization of agriculture, you need to ask the question, how many people does that displace, and what do those displaced people do? Because there's certainly no jobs available in the town for them. So I think the answer is basically more productive, more effective, and enriched smallholder agriculture. And the primary means of delivering that is through training. So we as GADC, we supported by AgDevco and other donor funders, and we train on average about 60,000 smallholder farmers across northern Uganda in basic agronomy and financial literacy. that we believe what we've shown increases productivity and increases household wealth. I found that Sir Dietz's presentation earlier interesting. You know, he talked about the Amazon reversing, he talked about the Mekong Delta reversing, and about the basic impossibility of big corporations becoming net zero carbon emitters. And those are, you know, we hear a lot about the negatives and the difficulties and you know, the challenges. But it strikes me that in Uganda, we are sitting right on an incredible positive story, and that is smallholder farmers. The emissions have got to be very close to zero, if not negative carbon emissions. Smallholder farmers are practicing agriculture in a way that, you know, somebody in the most sort of progressive household in Brooklyn would envy, and yet they're doing it naturally because that is how they are, not because they've sort of gone through the whole commercialization, come out the other side. And it's in terms of soil protection, in terms of you know, insect life, not mass spraying, not poisoning the soils with pesticides and herbicides and fertilizers, etc. Uganda's an absolute treasure trove, and yet nobody seems to pay any attention to it. And it's not, you know, Uganda exports very, very high quality coffee, cocoa, sesame, cotton, tea, tobacco to premium markets. So it's not as if the product that we're producing is inferior. It might come from very, very poor farmers in very poor areas, but we're producing some of the best cotton, sesame, cocoa, coffee in the world. So, you know, I think we should be focusing on what Uganda has, and trying to work out how that can play a bigger role in all of these COP things.
Thanks so much, Bruce. And I think we'll get the chance to hear from you more in the panel session as well. But thank you very much for those insights. I agree. You know, Uganda is a treasure trove for its organic farming in northern Uganda and other areas. So thank you for that insight, and thank you for the great work you do with AgDevCo support. We'll move on to the last presentation now before we do move on to the panel session. Do I have Isaac Kahara on the line from UK Export Finance to talk about that as the final source of UK climate finance? Thank you. I can see you, but I can't hear you, Isaac.
Is that better now?
Yes, thank you.
And can you see my presentation as well? Good. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone who's joining us. Glad to be here today in this discussion. My name is Isaac Kahara, and I lead UK Export Finance business origination in East Africa. I'm going to walk you through the type of work we're doing on the clean growth space. Just a little bit of background: who we are. UK Export Finance is a UK government department. We are what is referred to as an export credit agency. We like to say that our main mission is to ensure that no viable export fails for lack of financing or insurance from the private sector. And we have a reputation of being one of the most innovative and flexible export credit agencies in the world. Now, I mean, moving on the clean growth space and the work that we're doing there, some numbers. So last year, we provided over £2.4 billion in support on sustainable projects across the world. In terms of ranking against our peer ECAs or export credit agencies, we are second in the world. I think that the leader there is the South Korean ECA, our equivalent in South Korea. And some of the deals that we have closed in the past have won accolades and awards on the sustainable space. A good example is the offshore wind project in Taiwan and the sustainable transport project in Egypt that we recently closed. I would like to say our ambition on the clean growth space is that last year we published a very ambitious plan to go net zero by the year 2050. And what, in essence, that means is that we are going to decarbonize all our financial portfolio, and we'll be supporting more and more to what we refer as green exports. What this means, in essence, is that we will support more projects on the green growth space. This includes, renewables, but also climate adaptation exports, while improving management of climate-related risks in our portfolio. So what we'll be doing going forward is that we'll be proactively seeking out opportunities for companies who are seeking to develop low carbon projects. And at the moment, about 50% of our project pipeline is on the clean growth space. Now, in terms of the offer that we have for Uganda, sorry, this went too far. So the type of support we provide is that we provide attractive financing terms to any overseas buyers of UK goods and services. And what this does to UK exporters, it makes their offering more competitive, because they can supplement their technical offer with a financing offer. And on the buyer side, who in most cases is also the borrower, we provide support in form of guarantees, and in some very limited cases, we also provide direct lending facilities as well. One point to note on the direct lending, we have a ring-fenced pot of money, a portfolio of about £2 billion globally to support clean growth projects. So I'll be talking a lot about clean growth, but it's very similar concept to green growth. In terms of Uganda, our country limit is about £2 billion. So this is the amount of risk we are willing to take in the Ugandan market. I would say in terms of our portfolio, in terms of our exposure rather, we have about £500 million in terms of exposure in projects which we have reached in financial close. And one specificity of Uganda is that we are also able to provide any financing in local currency. So how does this work for the financing of our projects? So on the left side, it starts with the UK exporter who has won a contract to deliver a project abroad. And so the borrower is usually based overseas. In this particular case, it will be in Uganda. And in most cases, this borrower will seek financing for this specific project. It could be a renewable energy project. It could be the purchase of equipment from the UK. It could be wind turbines, could be solar panels, etc. And what we do, we come in as UK Export Finance and provide a guarantee on that commercial facility. And by doing so, we de-risk the transaction, which means that for the borrower, the cost of funding is reduced. And for the exporter, the risk of non-payment is covered as well, because our guarantees are 100% unconditional. And they cover all sorts of risks, including political risks, etc., risk of default of the borrower, and so on. So direct lending, that is rather straightforward. In that particular case, we will provide liquidity directly into the transaction from Her Majesty's Treasury. Some examples of projects that would classify as clean growth, they include obviously renewable energy, but also clean transportation and any initiatives that support climate change adoption, sustainable water and wastewater management. This is an area that we do a lot of work because this part of the world is actually exposed to very huge water shortages, and we are looking to increase this type of projects, support these types of projects.
Thanks. Sorry, Isaac, if you wouldn't mind just finishing off your remarks, if that's okay, just that we do want to move on to the panel discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got 2 more slides and then I'll be done. So in terms of value proposition, I'd just like to
Sorry, Isaac, I wouldn't mind if you could just kind of bring it to a close in a few seconds. That would be great, rather than going through the last slides. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. So let's say that some examples of the projects we have supported on the clean growth space. The Nexus Green project in Uganda is one of them, but we have also done similar projects, clean water supply projects in Ghana. And one of the largest reduction in Africa we've done is the clean transportation project in Cairo. And obviously I'll stop there and take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and sorry to cut you off a bit short there before you had the chance to present the last slides, but we've got half an hour left. We are really keen to move on to the panel discussion. So at that point, some of my guests will be leaving me. So thank you very much to Loazi on the line, to Etienne again, to Juan from Mkopa, from Ivan from AgDevco, and to you, Isaac, from UK Export Finance. So thank you very much. You can leave the stage if you'd like to, and we'll now move on to the panel discussion. So do anyone joining on the Zoom call, do feel free to post your questions in the comment bar, and my colleague will feed them through to me and we'll ask those. Before I do that, let's just, we've got Mr. Andrew Masaba joining, who's the Assistant Commissioner of Development Assistance and Regional Cooperation at the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. Andrew, if you're on the line, I'll start by handing over to you to say, what do you think is the importance of climate finance for Uganda? Thank you.
Thank you, Lewis. And first of all, I want to thank the UK government for this initiative. I think that it's going to go a long way in aiding Uganda to achieve the kind of objectives that we have for our climate desired outcomes. Specific to your question, Lewis, you know, the importance stems from the vulnerability index. The NDI, the Notre Dame Index, rates Uganda as one of the most vulnerable countries. And therefore, to sort the kind of priorities that we have set out in the NDC document, the revised nationally determined contributions, there's a lot of climate finance and green financing that is required to sort the kind of challenges that we have in the different sectors: energy, agriculture, urban planning, and so on. We have strategies in place like the Vision 2040 and the National Development Plan that is running, that has been prepared in consultation from all different walks of development, and therefore, and it's costed with an implementation plan. And therefore, I think climate finance is nothing that we can let go of in the short term, medium term, and long term. To sum it up, all sorts of sources for climate finance are very important for implementation of these that I've talked of in summary. And there are details that relate to that question if I avail the time to give you so.
Thanks, Andrew, and I'm sure we'll bring you in again to hear more of your insights. The first question, though, the second question, which I'll put to Tim Streeter from Private Infrastructure Development Group, is, what does the term bankable project really mean, and what does the Private Infrastructure Development Group do to assess whether a project is bankable? What are the key things people need to bear in mind? Over to you, Tim.
Oh, thank you, Louis. Actually, I want to reverse that question. Because we only get involved really when a project isn't bankable. So maybe, I don't know, it might be a better question to ask one of the developers on the call, but let's say, a bankable project means that there's an opportunity for the developer or for the entrepreneur to actually earn an economic return from that, to create jobs, to scale up that project, to attract more capital, and this virtuous circle is unleashed. Our starting premise is that the project's not bankable. There's too many risks. It needs de-risking. So I guess the second part of your question is quite interesting, because how we set about assuring ourselves that our intervention will help that project attract and mobilize and catalyze the private sector capital that we want it to, and therefore become sustainable. And the way we'll look at that is through our publicized theory of change. We must be assured that we're going to achieve a positive development outcome. what does it do for the planet? What does it do for people? What does it do for the wider economy, the local economy? And does it transform the market with a positive outcome? So if you look at the projects that we showcased, Etienne talked about Zembo, Luazi talked about Kikagati. You can see that each of those projects, and indeed any project we'll look at, will have a positive effect. The project that we just closed and the High Commissioner referred to in her opening remarks in Lake Victoria to establish the transport corridor on a roll-on, roll-off ferry, we hope will result in journey times being cut, alleviate traffic congestion, and thereby have a positive impact both on the local economy and on the climate. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yes, no, thank you so much. I think there's a really helpful comments about, the fact that the UK climate finance investment vehicles are looking for both that, at least a solid return on the investment, but also, an impact. Maybe I'll hand over to Ellen as well. Do you have anything to add on what you think makes a project bankable or not? And maybe in addition to that, what can businesses do as a first step if they want to access climate finance? Over to you, Ellen.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. And I know there are CDC investment colleagues in the audience as well who hopefully could elaborate on the answer in other parts of the session. But in terms of what bankable means for us, I think very much building on Tim's answer, actually, as I mentioned in my opening comments, CDC is looking at assessing both the financial return of a project and the impact return of a project. And that's really central to our next 5-year strategy, is that we're impact led. And so that for climate finance is really being able to articulate the benefit of this investment on the environment, whether that is mitigation in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions or adaptation and resilience by building that resilience to a specific, context-specific physical climate risk. And so I think that links into the second question, which was around how could a business look to access UK climate finance? There are many points that we need to see when we're assessing an investment, a strong business case, potential of financial returns, although CDC has a very modest return target, and we do have more concessional capital for more innovative climate finance investments, which is something we can also touch on later in questions. So, there is a financial assessment, but in terms of this impact assessment that we do, we would very much, as we were taking a business through our investment process or a fund indeed, work with them to be able to articulate that impact case. And particularly from climate, I think this can be helpful more broadly in fundraising, because we know that as signalled by COP26, that the appetite and the increase in green financing is set to grow over the next 5 years. That's clear from the huge numbers of asset managers that came together to make that signal. And so being able to articulate in your fundraising what your impact is on the environment, potentially attaching impact metrics to that, I think can be helpful for accessing UK climate finance's discussion of today's conference, but also more broadly, and particularly at exit, when we're thinking about mobilising more climate finance. And so I would encourage that to be something that's part of a fundraising case, if relevant, and also is something that CDC could work with companies on. So Juan mentioned that, hopefully we do as a patient investor bring a lot to our investments in terms of, ESG support, patient capital, and being able to support on this broader climate finance narrative.
Great, thanks so much, Ellen. I'm interested to hear, I guess, from Bruce to start with, but also Etienne, if you're still on the line, I've got a comment in the questions asking you as well. But, how did you both, starting with Bruce, how did you kind of make sure that your project was bankable, and it was able to receive this climate finance? And why did you choose AgDevco and PIDG respectively? Be interested to hand over to you, Bruce, and then if you're still on the line, Etienne, and you're able to answer, that would be interesting too. So over to you, Bruce.
Well, bankable means that the institutions think they're going to get their money back. And so you have to present a business proposition that shows that you have the initial funds to support it, that whatever funds, in our case, like DevCo put in, they're going to get it back out again with a healthy interest rate. So our funds aren't particularly concessionary. The interest rates are pretty much what we get in commercial, from a commercial bank. But because DevCo is a development institution, they are much more interested in places like northern Uganda, which normal banks probably wouldn't be interested in. But it's no difference to presenting just a normal business plan. I mean, our experience, and we were introduced to DevCo through Acumen, through another impact investment fund. But my overall impression, and I've been in this in our business for 26 years. We started in Eastern Uganda and then moved to Northern Uganda. Is that don't get your hopes up. Don't think development finance institutions are terribly different to banks. They need to get their money back. They need to earn a return. You need to show them they're going to do that.
Thanks, Bruce. Very clear. Etienne, if you're willing to come in, it'd be good to hear from you as well.
Yeah, sure. So the easy answer and the short answer would be we have chosen Infraco Africa because we didn't have the choice. That's a bit joking, but a bit true as well. E-mobility in Africa is a risky area, is a risky sector because it's new, and finding people able to take this risk, there are not a lot on the investment place, and you can't find a lot of investors able to invest in this sector and able to invest this kind of amount. So basically, Infraco Africa was able to take this risk and was able to put on the table significant amounts. You have noted that we had other investors as well, Mobility 54 and DOB, but Infraco is the lead investor and the one able to put significant amounts so that we can really scale up and really make a significant move.
Thanks very much. That's interesting as well. And Andrew, if you're still on the line, what do you think is the problems typical preventing firms in Uganda accessing these opportunities? So what we hear is the UK often is that we do have all of these investment vehicles that are looking to invest in the country. We hear a lot about, there's great opportunities in agriculture, manufacturing and other sectors, but there isn't that many projects which are ready to receive this climate finance. I don't know whether you think that's true, and if so, what do you think the problems driving that are?
Thank you. Yeah, I do think that it's very true. The project development capacity is still a bit lacking in many of the spectra that we are dealing with to implement climate change priorities. But first of all, before even going that far, for you to benefit from any kind of finance, and that includes green finance and climate finance, businesses have to, first of all, start operating as businesses. We have a large spectrum of companies, or briefcases, as you may put it, which are not operating as companies. You know that to benefit from this kind of finance, there's lots that you have to prove, including the fiduciary and the managerial capacities of such funds. Starting with, of course, the first steps, the first principles. You come here and you register the company, get the certificates of incorporation, the investment licenses, obtain the tax, the TINs and trading licenses. And many of the companies, much as this sounds very simple, have not taken those simple steps, be it local or international. Many of them have not done. And when applying for this kind of funding, to invest the same, you have to first take that step. But also secondly, moving into a deeper analysis of the issue, many of them do not understand the concepts the green growth, the climate change, even climate finance itself, as well as the objectives that are intended to be achieved by climate finance. Some of these, of course, are enshrined in the strategy papers. For example, for government, if we stick to the comprehensive national planning frameworks, this is meant to benefit and benefit from the different sector players within the private and public, but they do not simply understand. So investment, first of all, into understanding what this entails, building the managerial capacities, and then in the specific capabilities like project development, as well as knowing the related sources of finance. It is as simple as companies or interested parties not knowing the basics as good as profiling the kind of financing that they want to gain from. You know, the different instruments exist, the grants, equity and carbon finance, as well as the concessional loans, but where to get them and how to access them and deploy the same, as well as the new forms that the UK EF is talking about, like the alternative financing forms like the ECAs. Now, specific to that one, I think the forms that currently exist on the market are still very expensive, given the kind of premiums that are to be paid to access and deploy the same. So you find that many of the companies are opting for the easy targets if they know them, like the climate funds. For example, the private sector facility at the Green Climate Fund, as well as the ones provided by the government. For example, government of Uganda, the grants that are provided through calls for proposals, while partnering with some of the DPs like UNDP and EU in the recent past. We've deployed some of them. But these ones provide less finance. The point is that the more sophisticated products are not well understood by the deployers of the same. There are many other areas where if you build capacity, you'd find that it would be easier for companies to obtain finance. For example, we have a small business recovery fund. I don't know how many partners or companies know about this. We have incentivized products, including the projects for financial inclusion of rural areas in the country, as well as products from entities like the Uganda Development Bank, providing a very soft financing, but access of the same has not been a success, and therefore it has been very hard for these companies to deploy the same. The most specific challenges, project development capacities, access to finance in general, as well as the lack of knowledge on what it really means to invest and to attract financing towards climate change and green growth in general.
Thanks so much, Andrew. And I think, you raised an interesting question there, saying, businesses don't necessarily know what climate finance is, and therefore it's hard for them to access it and to understand some of these complex products. I guess one question from the comments that this leads on to for Ellen is, what is CDC's definition of climate finance? And, because it varies by all different organizations. And, what's the specific question? It says, can you share with us the key goals and objectives of CDC, particularly relating to the UK's COP presidency, please? So yeah, how do you define climate finance at CDC?
Great, yes, very happy to talk on this in more detail. So the climate finance methodology that we use at CDC Group is that of the multilateral development banks. And so I think that's helpful because we're trying to work with partners to coalesce around the same definition of climate finance. And I totally acknowledge Andrew's point that it can sometimes feel opaque about what climate finance actually is. And we're seeing more broadly the green finance landscape actually become more complex, with other green taxonomies. And so there is really urgent work that also was spoken about COP26 in the broader market sense to align these. But I guess narrowing down to what that means practically for CDC, we use the Multilateral Development Bank's climate finance methodology. So do many of our DFI peers from FMO, Proparco, etc. And that's really segregated into two types of climate finance. So mitigation finance would be an investment in a business or a technology type that either removes carbon from the atmosphere, so we've touched on nature-based solutions earlier and as a key mechanism for carbon removal, or avoids future emissions. So think about renewable energy would avoid emissions versus a status quo, which might be a fossil fuel power plant. And so comparing those two scenarios and demonstrating that the renewable energy investment would avoid emissions allows you to qualify something as mitigation finance. And globally, mitigation finance is the bulk of climate finance that we see today. But there's huge emphasis and importance of increasing flows of adaptation finance. And this was, again, spoke about at COP26 and is something that CDC is focusing on with DFI partners. So we've kicked off the Adaptation and Resilience Investor Collaborative to really increase our capability and delivery of adaptation finance. And in brief, adaptation finance would be an investment that responds to a context-specific physical climate change risk. And so we just invested in a business called Cropin, which unfortunately is not a Ugandan example, but is one we often talk about with adaptation finance, which is a sort of crop monitoring technology which monitors weather and climatic patterns on farms and provides information to farmers to help cope with the changing climate that we're seeing across nearly all countries today. And there is now evidence from looking at Cropin and how that impacts farmers that is useful information that helps build resilience and increase yields in the face of a warming climate. In terms of understanding how to apply these, this will be my final point to be brief. Mitigation finance has a sector-based list, and you can Google it, and it's a list of technologies: solar, wind, electric vehicles, clean technology manufacturing, which pretty much apply in every context. Adaptation finance is context specific, and so I did touch on how CDC Group could work with current and future investees to articulate climate finance. This is something we want to do more of, and so by context specific, you have to look at the physical climate risk in that location and then be able to articulate how you are bringing forward a solution that responds to that physical climate risk. I'll pause there before going into too many more details.
No, thank you. I think that's the right level of detail. Thanks very much, Ellen. And I guess, Tim, Ellen's spoken there about how there are many different development partners that are offering climate finance. Can I ask you, what do you think is kind of unique or special about the UK's offer in this space?
Well, first of all, as chairman or chairperson of COP, you would expect the UK to take a leading role. I think that the technologies that can be deployed are risk appetite to back projects that are first of a kind and pioneering in what are challenging markets throughout Sub-Saharan Africa and South and Southeast Asia are probably second to none. So I would say our appetite is not to be risk averse, it's just to be risk aware, and to really work at those projects to make them sustainable and achieve lasting impact. I think is incredibly important. And we've been doing that for a very long time. Institutions that are here today, UKEF, AgDevCo, CDC, we've all been doing that for a very long time. And sometimes we probably undersell ourselves because we really want to make sure that impact is really driven home and is enduring.
Thanks so much, Tim. Great. Well, we're running out of time. I guess I've just got one last question for Andrew, if you're there. It's the question is, what message would you have for businesses here in Uganda, about climate finance, and just how important do you think this is for Uganda's development, and what's the future of climate finance here in Uganda? Thanks.
Well, simply to put it very simply, is that businesses here should be very proactive and interest themselves in an area that the government of Uganda rates very highly. For us, it's a going concern, and it's a growing concern as well. The challenges are not going anywhere, and that is why the strategies and our operations are aiming to continue making the gains and strides that we've already made and build on them and attract climate finance towards this cause. The beneficiaries of this are none other than the implementers, of course, including the businesses that you're talking about. Again, as I told you, we are very vulnerable. We are the 15th most vulnerable country in the world. So there's still a lot of need for climate finance. Now, there are recent developments within the country that, of course, give a lot of hope to the businesses to pursue this cause. For example, we have the National Climate Change Act that strives to optimize the opportunities of Uganda in mobilizing climate change finance. Here at the ministry, if you talk of institutional developments, then we have newly created, with the support of the UK and other partners, what we are calling the Climate Finance Unit, to focus our energies and mobilize and avail this to them. So they have to be very available and ready in the way that I described earlier in my opening remarks to get this. There's an updated NDC document. By the way, as a national designated authority, the role doesn't only spread to the public entities. We support even the private entities to access climate finance. But for the private entities to benefit from this, then they have to understand what the prioritization framework, the national prioritization framework. So they need to look at the green growth driven development strategies, avail themselves with the disaster risk atlases and how to participate in the same, and where they have footprints and ground, where they can support and either partner or work alone. It's also acceptable. There's a long-term financing strategy in the offing. We are now macro modeling to mainstream these risks into the planning processes to benefit both the businesses and the public sector entities. Sustainable procurement is something that we are preoccupying ourselves with. We want so to benefit from supplying, for example, to the public sector, then there are conditions that have to be met, and therefore the businesses have to interest themselves to know what this is about. There's a climate finance task force, as you know, aided by the UK, and we're going to deliberate much more on how to aid businesses to access and deploy climate finance.
Thank you so much, Andrew, and thanks to everyone who's presented in this session. It's been really insightful, I think. I'll just draw out a few key points for what I think we've learned today. Firstly is about the uniqueness of the UK offer. I think we've heard a lot about how UK investment vehicles can support people from the development phase of their project to implementation. The UK's unique risk appetite, I think, is a really important point that Tim mentioned. And it's not just about financing, it's technical assistance, it's finance, it's kind of a very involved form of participation in delivering impact in Uganda. So I think, it's not only the level of financing available, it's also the level of support, which I think Bruce mentioned as being particularly important. It's not just in, energy sectors, it's all sectors, it's infrastructure, agriculture, manufacturing, telecoms, where we're looking for impact. And as Andrew said, the key things Ugandan firms need to do are, understand they need to be fiduciary, they need to be prepared in terms of their management of fiduciary risks, and project development. But also, you know, as you hopefully Uganda businesses on the line will have learned something today about how to access the UK's investment vehicle and climate finance offer. And if they want to, they can access the email address which is on the website now, which will enable you to email through to the High Commission, and we will put you in touch with investment vehicles as necessary. So now over to Andrew, who'll round off the session and tell us what's next.
Brilliant. Thank you so much indeed, Louis. A huge thank you to all of our speakers. And a huge thank you to all of our panelists. Some really brilliant, insightful, but also kind of practically useful tips about kind of how we can work better together on the critical issue of climate finance. Now, our organisers are keeping us to a very, very tight schedule, so I'm not going to say very much other than huge thank you to Louis, huge thank you to panellists and speakers. And the next session on clean energy is going to begin in about 10 minutes at 2:10 East Africa time. So please do take an opportunity for a quick break, and I hope to see as many of you back online or in the room as possible in about 10 minutes. Thank you very much. Thank you.
To resources to improve their productivity and incomes. As a long-term investor with over 50 investments across the African continent, AgDevco is well placed to help connect agribusinesses and smallholder farmers in ways that deliver benefits for all involved. We provide long-term flexible capital to growing agribusinesses, and we can mobilize soft funding to support technical assistance programs. Through our Smallholder Development Unit, under a 5-year program supported by the MasterCard Foundation and the UK government, we have helped agribusinesses engage smallholders more effectively as suppliers and customers. This work will be continued through AgDevco's Technical Assistance Facility, which shares best practice and other lessons learned from over a decade of investing in Africa. We have invested in commercial agribusinesses in East, Southern, and West Africa that have linked hundreds of thousands of farmers to markets, of whom 37% are women. In northern Uganda, we have provided working capital to the Gulu Agricultural Development Company, GADC. GADC is revitalizing the region's economy, buying organic cotton, sesame, and chilies from 30,000 smallholder producers.
Through the support of AgDevco, farmers were trained in good agronomic practices using video-based trainings, which benefited a lot of female farmers in our network.
Over the next decade, we plan to double our investment portfolio and to continue to support our investees with technical assistance. We invest to create commercially sustainable agribusinesses that help improve the livelihoods and resilience of thousands of smallholder farmers and employees. That's how we transform African agriculture to benefit both people and planet.
Farmers around us here have no access to electricity, no access to clean cooking fuel, and no access to milling. So to mill their rice and groundnuts and maize, they have to drive miles away to Gulu. They have to pay for transport, they have to pay for storage and accommodation.
Mandulis is an electricity company that uniquely also provides agricultural value addition. Farmers bring us their crops, and we turn this into higher value products. This alone doubles their income. We're trying to create a way of generating electricity that delivers value to the local communities in which we operate.
Now, we've come here so that we use the waste from all the farming around us to produce electricity through biomass gasification at each of these sites.
At the same time, that focus on biomass means we can not only generate electricity, but we end up with a byproduct, that biochar, which can be used to produce cooking fuel. Doing that means that we save nearly 1 million trees per annum. Technology is a thread that ties everything together. We combine the blockchain technology, AI, and Internet of Things to make sure that we can address critical bottlenecks that allows us to engage thousands of farmers. And the cost of settlement of electricity transactions go down significantly.
In a sense, energy is the center of entrepreneurship in the regions, and by providing these underserved areas with access to electricity, we're hoping that it won't just turn on a light, it'll turn on a movement towards improving people's lives in those regions.
Now is the time for the free world to fight back and to use the power of economics and technology to promote freedom, not fear.
This year's G7 summit in Cornwall will be about how we build back better.
As we seek to advance the causes of free trade, free enterprise, freedom and democracy.
If we don't get serious about climate change today, it will be too late for our children to do so tomorrow.
Together with our friends and partners, we can make sure there is no doubt that sexual violence in war is a red line that must not be crossed.
The United Kingdom, Australia, and the United States are creating a new trilateral defence partnership known as AUKUS.
Our adversaries seek to use economics and technology as tools of control. We want to use them as tools of liberation.
This deployment will project our influence and demonstrate our commitment to the peace and security of the region.
I hold this. Just we are allocating further humanitarian aid for the very serious situation in Afghanistan. I saw firsthand how the UK is helping British nationals and vulnerable Afghans. We stand with Ukraine in supporting their security and defence and helping them become more energy independent. Britain is determined to work with our friends to form a network of liberty that spans the world.
At UK Export Finance, we help companies win, fulfil and get paid for international business by providing guarantees, insurance and loans. As the world becomes greener than ever before, there are huge opportunities for businesses across the UK to be at the vanguard of the sustainable future. We provide the tools businesses need to tap into green markets across the world and have already dedicated over £2 billion of lending to financing clean growth.
First Subsea, primarily an oil and gas business, focused on connection systems, deep water oil and gas developments. We thought renewables was an up-and-coming industry. The products that we're providing now are for fixed and offshore wind. We are connecting the cables to the platforms. We understood quickly that the commercial proposition was very different, which meant that we did have to get a UK EF facility to help us along. The pitch was that they could offer us approximately a like-for-like 50% stake in any bonds that we needed, along with our bank. We have potentially had a major game change in this business because of this funding.
ODE has been involved in the design and engineering project management sector for over 50 years, primarily in the early days, oil and gas. Over the last 20 years, we've been involved in offshore wind. The size of the market, we're talking trillions of dollars.
We all know there's a transition that has to be made, and it's great to be part of that process.
Hi everyone, and welcome back, or welcome to those who are joining us for this session as the first session. We've had some really great discussions this morning about some of the challenges and focused in on financing related to green growth. This session is going to look at clean energy. Energy is clearly a major part of the story in terms of dealing with climate change and benefiting from the opportunities that are available from a kind of a greener path. Uganda's blessed in this regard. Anyone who's been around the country will have just seen the level of water, the level of hydroelectric, plus also the solar potential. And economic analysis shows that these investments generate a very positive return compared to the old economy fossil energy investments. As you might expect, Uganda's already a leader in renewable energy production at the grid level, but there's still a need to continue to roll out renewable energy sources, particularly in rural Uganda. So in this session, you're going to hear from leaders who are delivering innovative energy solutions here in Uganda. And I'm very pleased that Gavin from the British High Commission has agreed to chair this session, so I'll allow him to introduce himself and to take over the chairing. Thank you, Gavin.
Thank you, Andrew. I just want to say my name is Gavin DaCosta. I'm a Prosperity Officer at the British High Commission. It's been fantastic already. I've been in the background just directing, and I'm seeing all the great comments, all the great questions. So I'm hoping we can get to quite a few of them today. But before that, I just want to say we've got a couple of sessions before we move on to the panel, and we have the absolute pleasure to be joined by Alice Goodbrook and her team here. So I'll hand over to them to discuss their topic now. Thank you.
Hi everyone. As Gavin said, I'm Alice Goodbrook. I'm an innovation lead at Innovate UK, and I have the pleasure of running the Energy Catalyst programme. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Energy Catalyst, a little bit about Innovate UK, which is the organisation I work for, and try and explain kind of what projects that we're funding. I've got the pleasure of being joined by a few colleagues today. So I've got Alex, who works for Energy Catalyst. I've got Zoe, who works for Smart Villages. And I've got Laura, who works for Aptec Technologies. And those two, Aptec and Smart Villages, do two of the projects that we've got we're funding in Uganda. So hopefully I should have some slides. Oh, perfect. So Innovate UK, for those of you that don't know, is the UK's innovation agency. And we're here to try and drive economic growth by investing in early stage technology and getting them to market as quickly as possible, because that way we can create companies, grow companies, get jobs, and get investment back for the UK government through the form of tax. It's a wonderful thing. And while Innovate UK is mainly focused on UK companies and UK economic growth, there are a few programmes, Energy Catalyst being one of them, that uses the UK aid budget to focus on economic development in Africa and Asia. So why are we interested in doing kind of UK and overseas collaboration and looking at Uganda as an interesting place to do these collaborations? Well, though it might not seem it on first glance, the UK and Uganda have very similar problems in terms of their energy system. Climate change is coming, if we like it or not. Businesses need to adapt, and we need new technologies in order to make that happen. While Uganda doesn't have that much of a grid, I think you've got about 40% electrification rate, the UK has a full grid, but it's exceptionally old and it needs updating. We're moving personally from a kind of large-scale generation assets to much more distributed energy. So we're looking at things like mini grids and distributed technology, as well as things like how to balance renewables on the system, which is a similar problem to what Uganda's having. So actually, in terms of the technology that we're developing, be it grid technologies, be it new types of renewable generation, the technologies are directly applicable to both environments, even if you need to change the business model or change the communities that you're trying to offer it up to. And this is where Energy Catalyst comes in. So Energy Catalyst's mission is to accelerate the innovation needed to end energy poverty. Providing finance and advisory support to innovators, we try and create the strategic partnerships, so strategic partnerships between the UK and the rest of the world, uncover insights and tell people all about them, and develop business models, primarily to improve the lives of people in Africa and Asia. Now, Energy Catalyst didn't always used to be this energy access focused programme. It used to be very UK orientated, but because the programme's got lots of co-funders in it, so we got money from the FCDO, thank you very much. We've got money from BEIS, so the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, and it's all different UK aid budgets that are gradually coming in to overtake the money that Innovate UK itself used to put in, and EPSRC. So now it's 100% focused on this energy access mission. And its main scope is around creating clean energy technology, so hitting the energy trilemma of low cost, low carbon and secure. We do two main things in Energy Catalyst. We fund projects. We funded about 140 million of them. Alex will talk to you about it later. But we also provide business and advisory support in order to help their companies grow. So when time comes to sell things to market, not only is the technology ready, but the business is ready too. And in order to do this, we have these collaboration building, we have the competitions, and we have acceleration. So the competitions normally launch once a year. Please don't Google it, because last year we didn't manage to do it, but we are hoping to try and get round 9 out this year. We do lots of collaboration, so we're trying to create these equitable partnerships between the UK and other countries all around the world. It's open to any kind of type of business, any type of NGO, anywhere in the world, you name it, you can apply for funding as long as you're doing innovative energy access, either technologies or business models. Then once a year we have the competitions, and then we also give acceleration support to each of the projects. And this is what the kind of funding normally looks like if it's whetted your appetite and you're interested in applying to future rounds. So normally it's about the 20 million mark, though again, if you Google, you'll see it does vary a little bit. Alex will talk to you later. And we have 3 strands. We have an early, a mid, and a late. The early strand is very much a feasibility-focused projects. So we're talking small scale, up to 12 months, up to 200K, very much just out of university. By the time we get to mid-stage, it's about £1.5 million worth, and that's prototyping. So you might have got a material out of university, seen if it's feasible to do it in a feasibility study, and then put it into practice in a small prototype in a mid-stage project. By late stage, they're massive projects by that point. They are up to £5 million, and it's much more about that pre-commercial demonstration in order to see how the business model works in country and in situ. As I said, it's the energy trilemma. We're focusing on energy access, and we also make sure that all the projects look at gender equality and social inclusion. And the reason we're doing this is because we're trying to get these solutions to market as quickly as possible. We all know that energy access projects traditionally haven't been very good at being investable early on. So providing grant money, we de-risk it so private investors can come in later. We're trying to build networks between the UK, Uganda, UK and Asia, the UK and everywhere in the world that shares these common problems. But most importantly, we're trying to unlock impact. We want lives in Africa and Asia to be improved, to give energy access and to help beat poverty. That's it from me. I'm now going to hand over to Alex, which is going to talk to you a little bit about the impact that we've had so far.
Hello. So I'm Alex. So over 8 rounds of funding that we've had since 2014, we've funded over 147 million pounds worth of projects, with 60 million pounds of co-funding and over 75 million pounds worth of private investment. Since the focus has shifted to energy access, we've funded over 360 projects with more than 1,000 partners. Of this, over 10% of the partners have been internationally collaborative. Next slide, please. As Alice mentioned, the total funding amount, about £67 million is dedicated to energy access in almost 160 projects out of 360, spread across the 8 rounds of funding. As you can see there, round 7 did have slightly more funding and was hoping to get back up to that sort of level of funding in future rounds. Cool. the scope of Energy Catalyst focuses on the energy trilemma of low cost, low carbon, and secure. Due to this, a large amount of the funded projects focus on solar, mini-grids, biomass, and energy storage. This is a combination of sort of natural project focuses alongside focused spending requirements. And the scope of this means that we can focus on SDG 7 and SDG 13. So this is sort of a map of where we're funding globally. And we have our main focuses in Sub-Saharan Africa and South and Southeast Asia. Sometimes our funding sort of does request other locations, hence why we've got a couple of projects in Mexico and Bolivia. But our main focus is in India, Nigeria, and Kenya, as these provide historically strong business links. And part of what Energy Catalyst is trying to do is expand these links and try and expand these sort of options to incorporate countries such as Uganda. If we go on to the next one. So focusing in on Uganda, this map sort of shows where a couple of the locations of our funded projects are, and some of that we've got here today. Modularity Grid that we've also got doing work up near Gulu, and they're here today to talk about the work that they're doing. So that's it for me. I think now we're going to pass on to Bernie Jones from Smart Villages.
Good afternoon, everybody, and I'm very sorry to be here in the UK and not with you there in sunny Uganda. My name's Bernie Jones. I'm from Smart Villages Research Group, and we collaborate with a number of partners in Uganda, including Aptec, who are going to speak next in this session. For the innovations that we're talking about here, though, our partners are Ecolife Foods, based just up the road from Kampala in Matuga, and Kima Foods, who are a rural development NGO in Kasese. And if you'd like to move on to the next slide, if you're still doing the slideshow. So what we Smart Villages do as a company and in these projects is to develop and implement green technologies and sustainable business models mainly for rural development in partnership with those communities themselves. And to do that in a way that can demonstrate lasting social and economic impact for those communities. And the way that we try to do that is to adopt a holistic approach so that we're not focusing, for example, just on energy or just on agriculture, but to try and create solutions that manage to address all of the different community priorities across the board. So, for example, a particular solution or technology or business model that we might put in place with the communities would address energy and agriculture, water, gender, business incubation, and maybe even things like health and education all at the same time, depending on what the specific requirements of those communities are. Moving on to the next slide. So the first project I'd like to mention was with our partners Ecolife. We were researching how we could build a better and more affordable cold store that would be appropriate for rural communities and that only really uses local materials for its construction and insulation and locally available equipment for the cooling and the power generation. So obviously in terms of impact, that will allow communities to reduce their post-harvest losses, boost their income, but then from a green perspective, that's going to be using things like solar energy and very, very low cement building materials to put it together, so it has an environmental impact, but also because those materials are locally available and quite cheap, that makes it much, much more affordable for the communities themselves. And the technology that we've devised lets us achieve temperatures as low as 2 degrees Celsius and to be able to maintain that temperature as well over several days with no power input, for example, if it's very cloudy. And the specific solution we've devised also generates enough spare electricity that any community that adopts one of these cold stores can also have enough spare power for a number of shops or other services. Moving on to the next slide. The second project that I'd like to talk about takes that approach of the cold stores one step further, and for remote rural communities where the farmers are finding it very difficult to market their produce, we're developing what we call a farmers' enterprise centre, in which then the farmers can cooperate together to greatly increase the profits from their farm produce by, for example, aggregating it together and keeping it in cold or dry stores until they can sell it in bulk directly to the buyers in the cities. But this Farmers Enterprise Centre will also provide a number of additional services that can allow farmers to add value to their crops, to access information and inputs and support for their farming, and to encourage the farmers themselves and the whole community to establish new enterprises that can use, for example, some of the solar energy that's provided in these centres to transform the economics of the whole community. And again, our hope is that any spare energy that these centres generate can then be shared with the households and the shops that surround the building. Over the next slide, my colleague Zoe Slattery, who's on the panel, will cover the way in which we collaborate with our partners and communities.
Yep, so hi, my name is Zoe Slattery, and I'm the project manager for the Farmers Enterprise Centre that Bernie was just talking about. In that role, I'm also the main partner liaison, talking with Ecolife Foods and with Kima Foods. I want to talk to you a little bit today about how we work with partners as smart villages and how we work with communities in a more practical sense. So you can see here, there are 3 tenets that Smart Villages takes into account when we're forming in-country partnerships. And those 3 are having a shared vision, they're working collaboratively together throughout the design process, and they're working on mutual capacity building. So the first one of these, having a shared vision, in practice means that we as partners sit down at the beginning of the project and we say, what does success mean? So with the Farmers Enterprise Centre, it's not just about having social impact, though obviously that's very important. It's also about financial sustainability, it's about community engagement, and it's about environmental sustainability. So the partners have to sit down at the beginning of the project and have that shared vision. Moving forward, you can take that shared vision into a collaborative design process. That means communicating constantly between partners to ensure that we keep having that shared vision when difficult decisions have to be made, because then all of those decisions are going to be made together as a consensus. The third tenet that we focus on is mutual capacity building. And what I mean by that is realizing that in a partnership, all the partners should benefit. It means recognizing that every partner has strengths, every partner has weaknesses that they're going to bring to the project. For instance, Smart Villages has a lot of technical expertise, but we do not have the same level of cultural and contextual understanding of the communities that our partners Ecolife Foods and Kima Foods do. So when I talk about mutual capacity building, I mean focusing on the strengths that each partner brings to the project and working with those to make the project even more successful. I also want to talk a little about how we work with communities. So the main thing that Smart Villages works to understand when working with communities is understanding how we can involve them in every single stage of the project. So we want to involve them in the research stage, in the design, and the implementation, and even the evaluation stage as well. When I talk about involving them in the design stage, what Smart Villages does with our in-country partners is to perform baseline surveys to get a fine, detailed understanding of how these communities work. How are the people in these communities living their day-to-day lives? What are their values? What are their priorities? And what are their needs? And then we use all of that information in the design stage of the project. In the design stage, we're still going to be working with the community members, and we're going to be doing interviews, and we're going to be finding out qualitative and quantitative data on what their needs and priorities are with this project, which again feeds into the implementation stage. The main takeaway is that you have to keep the community involved at all stages of the project, otherwise you're just not going to make a project that is beneficial to the community. The final thing that Smart Villages works on with our in-country partners is building up community governance and capacity, so that in the future these communities can take ownership of the project themselves, which is the end goal here. What I mean by that, there's a great example from Kima Foods, who we work with in Western Uganda, with the Farmers Enterprise Centre. They've been working with 2 communities for over a year to build up farming cooperatives in these communities, which now have over 100 farming members from the communities. These cooperatives can run the Farmers Enterprise Centres by themselves with minimal help from Kima Foods. Kima is also providing excellent capacity building in terms of agricultural skills and sustainable farming methods. So to sum up, the main thing that Smart Villages does when working with partners and with working with communities is ensuring that all the partners work well together with that shared vision, ensuring that we keep working together collaboratively through the process, and ensuring that we include the community and build up their skills throughout the project. This means in the end, it's not just Smart Villages that is going to grow from this project, it's also all of our partners and it's the communities. I'm going to finish by thanking Innovate UK for the chance to develop some of these collaborations and for helping us to create long-lasting growth impact here in Uganda.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you today. My name is Laura Corcoran. I'm the Chief Business Development Officer of Aptech Africa Limited. We're a company that works in solar energy and water pumping. We're an engineering, procurement, and construction company. We're headquartered here in Uganda, but we actually operate in 7 countries across Africa. Today I'm going to be talking about the project that we do called Pay and Pump, and I want to start by thanking Innovate UK for their funding and also Smart Villages for being such an awesome partner. So where this project came from, here in Uganda, climate change has made changes to the rain pattern, which has resulted in the death of crops and livestock. Additional challenges that farmers here in Uganda face, those who are using diesel pumps to irrigate, the fluctuating cost of diesel is an issue for them. And on top of that, farmers who want to irrigate with solar-powered water pumps are often not able to do that because they can't afford the upfront payment. So that's where Aptech stepped in with our solution called Pay and Pump. So this is a picture of it here. It's a mobile solar-powered water pumping system with a remote monitoring device. As you can see, it's solar-powered and it comes with a push cart so it can be shared between farmers. It's tailored specifically to meet the needs of farmers because they do not have to pay for the system up front. And the system is able to supply multiple households and multiple farms depending on the size of the gardens that they're irrigating. And as you can see, our solution is a surface pump. This solution comes with an irrigation package that's built for 1 to 2 acres of horticulture crops. It uses a sprinkler system, and we chose this because of the cost and the simplicity of it to use, and also because farmers are able to move the system and they're able to share it. So the system itself is innovative, but also the payment model that we've come up with is innovative. So here in East Africa, when people want to make a call or to use the internet, they buy airtime on their phone. So we use a similar kind of model called Water as a Service, where people, when farmers have the system, they can pay to pump for 1 day, 3 days, 1 week, and they can purchase their time with packages. So that's what we call Water as a Service. We also offer the system with upfront payments and then also as a lease-to-own model. One of the things that we've learned with Pay and Pump is that you need to have a holistic approach. So for Pay and Pump to succeed, our farmers have to succeed. An increase in crop yield is not dependent on just irrigation. There are a lot of other inputs, the seeds, fertilizers. You need to have experts within the communities where we are deploying these units that can give the support to the farmers. Within our company, we have irrigation experts. We liaison with agents within the community that also are agronomists and that can give agricultural support to the farmers. So we're providing a holistic solution. One of the really cool things about this project is the impact. So it has an economic, environmental, gender, and social impact. Economically, the system saves farmers time. It increased their household income. From increased yield, they can harvest a 3rd season. It insulates them from the fluctuating cost of diesel, and it can be used for both livestock and irrigation for horticulture solutions. Environmentally, using solar water pumps instead of diesel pumps saves on carbon emissions. From a gender perspective, traditionally the burden of carrying water in Africa has fallen on women. So with this solution, women have more time. They're able to do other economic activities with their time. And then socially, irrigation can be used to grow nutrient-dense foods, such as fruits and vegetables. It can also be used, the income from the project can be used for medical expenses and to improve health and education. So it has a really huge impact. Of course, there's challenges that we face with this project, as with any project. One of the challenges that we come across is that our solution requires a water source. So a lot of farmers might not have a water source, and specifically for us, it has to be a surface water source. So that kind of limits who we're able to provide this solution for. We also have issues with people mishandling the hardware, so we have to do a lot of education and sensitization with our clients. Also, there's a lot of products on the market that are cheaper and lower quality, and these affect the reputation of solar as an industry. So we're always battling those kind of issues. And in addition, there's a lack of market research around solar water pumping. That's something that, so we're really learning as we go. Insights from these projects, what we've learned is that there is still a huge gap when it comes to solar water pumping and when it comes to irrigation. There's a huge need for additional education and sensitization within communities. This is a new technology. We've learned that we need to work with sales agents within the communities. A lot of times the agents we work with have these systems themselves, so they can, serve as a testimony for other clients that are looking to get the systems. And also there's additional need for demonstration units. Here in Uganda, seeing is believing. So we have to make sure that these units are out there. When people see that they are successful, then they are also interested in using them. In addition, there's a need to have additional support for farmers throughout the entire agricultural value chain. So for us, we're looking at irrigation, but really when it comes to agriculture, you have to look at the inputs, your seeds, your fertilizers. You have to look at how crops are preserved going from field to table, and you have to look at off-takers. So as we're coming up with solutions, we really need to see how we can support the entire agricultural value chain. That is my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you everyone for that. I really appreciate it. You've made Energy Catalyst look as brilliant as I hope it is. Like I say, if this has piqued your interest, please do get in touch. We are hopefully having more funding this year. We're really keen on getting some more projects in Uganda. Lots of good collaborations can happen. So yeah, that's it from us, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alice and team. I learned a new word today, which was energy trilemma. Which is fantastic, by the way. But I was saying that there's a Q&A session at the end, so Alice will be back for that Q&A session, but thank you very much, Innovate UK, for coming along. Thank you. And at this time, round of applause in the room, please. So I'd like you guys to get up now, and we'll go to our next set of panelists who are coming along, which is Nexus Green. I want to say we're seeing all the comments and Q&A in the session, by the way, so keep them coming in, keep the comments coming. I'm hoping you're loving the conference as it is. We've got some fantastic attendees. We've had over 300 people on the line at any one given time. So yeah, keep coming along, keep engaging. This is a fantastic session. But at this time, I would like to bring up to the stage some really special guests that we have along. We have Nexus Green, a solar company based in the UK, but also have a Uganda company as well. I will let them introduce themselves now. So firstly, I'll hand over to Andrew.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrew Masoke, and I'm the Managing Director for Nexus Green. We're very happy to be here today, excited for the opportunities in Uganda, excited for renewable energy, and we're going to really try and tell you about what Nexus Green does, what the future looks like for us, and how it's going to impact Uganda. So we're an engineering, procurement, and construction firm, a British EPC, but we're focusing on innovative technologies that deal with renewable energy. We offer services such as solar irrigation, solar street lights, hybrid innovation solar solutions, and off-grid solar solutions, in addition to some exciting new technology that we'll get into a little bit later. But essentially, we're everything solar. I mean, that's the motto. That's what we live by. And we're here to kind of change the environment a little bit by adding a little bit of innovation and daring to dream big, daring to look at opportunities and understand, similar to what Her Excellency, the British High Commissioner, said this morning, that climate change is an opportunity. We need to kind of reverse from looking at it as a challenge, but an opportunity. So as we dare to dream in Uganda and in other countries as well, Nexus Green is going to pioneer some new and innovative ideas that we'll share with you as we go on. I'd like to start by just telling you about a few projects we've worked on, and then I'll pass it on to my colleagues. But we've really done some amazing stuff in a short period of time. And so, as it stands, we have created the largest hybrid solar system in Uganda at the moment, 516 kilowatt P, and it is running phenomenally. It is at the Kololo Ceremonial Grounds. It was funded by the Ugandan government, and we worked with them in partnership to help figure out how do we reduce some of their energy costs. that are spiraling out of control for a lot of the ministries within the Ugandan government. And so they turned to us. We worked with them. We did a pilot, and we're making sure that we add on follow-on services so that we don't leave our customer after the project is done, but we stay with them, knowing that Nexus Green is there to serve them as we move forward. So Kololo is the largest hybrid solar solution in Uganda, and we're looking to keep innovating and creating more opportunities like that. I think what's really exciting for us, though, is the fact that we're not only here for solar solutions, but we've decided to take it a step further. And so we're actually creating an 80 megawatt solar manufacturing facility in Kapeka in Luero Triangle. It's going to be one of the largest solar manufacturing facilities, or actually the first, I should say, in East Africa. And we plan on having it come online by the end of this year. And so with that, in addition to producing solar panels in Uganda, and by the way, we're looking at an estimate of a little bit over 150,000 panels a year to begin with, and then we're making sure that we construct our manufacturing facility in a way that we can expand and grow as demand arises. But in addition to producing the panels, we're also impacting the community. We're also looking at how we can create jobs, drive change, educate and teach about renewable energy, building a world-class factory where we can even bring students and they walk around and they understand the physics and the engineering and the science behind it. So we're really looking at not just impacting from a solar renewable energy standpoint, but also from a social and I would say socially responsible aspect of it. We also have. And I'm going to go into another big project, but I'll actually introduce my CEO, Ricky Verma, Honorable Ricky Verma, and he can introduce Gladys, but also talk about our larger project that is really having an incredible impact in Uganda as it stands.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks, Gavin, for inviting us here. My name is Ricky Verma. I'm the CEO and founder of Nexus Green, and we're really proud to be demonstrating what a massive impact solar irrigation has here in Uganda. So last year we closed 100 million euros supported by UK export financing that was between Government of Uganda under Ministry of Water and Environment and the UK Export Finance. So what essentially we're doing is we're going to be blanketing the whole country with solar irrigation schemes with farmers like our friend here, Gladys, who has kindly come and joined us from Mukono all the way to Kampala. So a round of applause for her, I think. And I think, the proof will be in the pudding. Like, we can talk about, statistics and theories, but the actual substance is, how it changes people's lives. Just to give you an understanding, like with our agronomists, we took Gladys's farm, where on average she was making around about $1,500 in revenue with our agronomists and the high yield crops like macadamia nuts, cashews, avocados. She's going to be projected to be making over $110,000 a year in revenue, which is a game changer for anyone. And imagine we're doing that over 687 times. So this is 687 sites we're doing. Average 4 or 5 farmers appreciating that system. The contribution to the community is going to be huge in the hundreds of thousands. So we as Nexus Green are, as my colleague Andrew said, we're all about innovation. The technology we're bringing is British technology with the knowledge transfer here in the heart, and really driving the core message that more people should get into farming. It actually is becoming more sustainable, especially using solar irrigation. And as Andrew was saying about, we are building an 80 plus megawatt factory here in the Pearl of Africa, in Kapeka, which is quite historic there. And it's going to be a complete game changer because we want people to understand how solar can have so many different applications and how it can be a massive positive thing. And as our colleagues earlier said, the quality in the market is true. They're not. The solar panels here are not. There's not really like how can I put it? There's not really like a governing body to really say this is a good panel, the quality and reassurance. So, you know, what Nexus Green is going to do is we're going to put those measures in place. So when you do buy a Nexus Green product, you know you're buying something that's obviously going to be really competitively priced, but with great quality. And that's the key to our deliverables, you know, providing something that is sustainable. And I really can't wait to introduce Gladys, you know, one of our farmers, you know, and we went to her farm actually with the High Commissioner, Her Excellency, I think last week, and she actually came when we just installed the equipment, and a few months later she's now seen the impact, and she was just absolutely surprised on seeing the tomatoes, seeing the passion fruit. I think, you know, actually I think she started having a good taste of the passion fruit when we were on site. So enough about me, I'm waffling here. I'll pass it over to Gladys, and Gladys can talk about some of the irrigation schemes that we've put in her farm.
Again. Thank you again. My name is Gladys Ndagire Chiseka. I live in Namayuba Mukono, and I'm a farmer. My farm is at Impumu village, which is about 6 miles away from my own home. I've been farming for a couple of years I wasn't very successful because of the dry seasons. Where I live, it is a hill place. The land is not very fertile, but if you give it water, it grows anything, and at any time. So I have about 39 acres, and I had only utilized a quarter because I couldn't manage whatever that quarter I used. I was using water from the well. It was expensive and really time-consuming. So my dream was to make Mpumu a model farm for a long, long time. So I tried on small scale by, you know, getting some small water, but I couldn't afford it because it was expensive and the irrigation things were expensive. I couldn't afford it. So anyway, last year I was approached by Nexus Green Limited, which was complementing a project, solar power irrigation and water system funded by UK government. Nexus Green gave me an irrigation system for the community. We are 4 of us who are sharing for irrigation, but the others are using it for irrigation for domestic water. In November, which is supposed to be really hot and sunny, we started planting tomatoes, passion fruits, and you know, we are hoping they are going to come in time. You know, when everybody has no fruits, we will be selling. So if you want to have some fruit, please just do come to my farm. The future really looks bright for us farmers in Mpumu. We expect more production in season in, season out. And you can imagine, we can plant from January to December. No worry about whether it is raining or it is going to rain, what season we have to plant. No, we plant anytime we want. So we are really glad that we have that thing. And some people have approached us to go on a big scale. Because of the water, we didn't have a big scale. We were using small scale, but now we can go on a big scale, and hopefully I can utilize some of this, most of my land. And I would like to take this opportunity, and I hope this opportunity will be distributed around Uganda so that more people can benefit, like I'm going to benefit. And it is not only me. We provide labor. People, you know, youth, a lot of youth haven't gone far with their studies, so they are hanging around in the villages. So they can come, you know, we employ them. I'd like to thank UK and Ugandan government to make my dream really come true. really come true.
Thank you. Round of applause for Gladys, please.
And also, I want to thank Nexus Green, who enables me to have this thing, irrigation. If I wasn't given the opportunity, I wouldn't be here today.
Lovely.
But they have given me the opportunity, and thank you very, very much.
Isn't that great? Thank you, guys. One more round of applause for Gladys, everybody. Thank you, guys. I think that was really great to hear more about what your system is doing, and also especially from Gladys, because that's really good. Yeah, obviously. So we're now going on to a panel session, a Q&A. So, Ricky, thank you for joining us. And I would like to invite Alice for Innovate UK back onto the stage. Thank you. But at this time, we also have two more panelists that will be joining us for this session. I would like to introduce you to Professor Brian. Apologies if I get your last name wrong. Isabire?
That's fine, given the circumstances.
Introduce yourself, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is, like I've been introduced, Dr. Brian Isabire. I'm the Commissioner for the Renewable Energy Department at the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development. My department takes care of development and sustainable utilization of renewable energy for socio-economic, but most importantly, environmental benefits for this country. Thank you.
Thank you. And as well as Dr. Brown, we also have Elizabeth Nyeko from Modulus Grid. Is Elizabeth on the line? Lovely. Great to see you, Elizabeth. Hi. Just before you start, I just want to say that I have heard so much about you, but I've never met you in person. You are like a star of the British High Commission. So it's a pleasure to meet you in person, but please do introduce yourself.
Gavin, that's very kind of you. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Elizabeth Nyeko, and I'm the founder and CEO of Modularity Grid.
Thank you. So I'm going to take the pleasure of asking the first question, and we've got loads of questions coming in, by the way, so everybody in the panel, please be prepared. Of Dr. Brian, I just want to ask, what support is the government of Uganda offering to businesses to become more energy efficient?
Thank you very much. Government starts with policy. So the first part of our contribution as the government is to make sure that we have an enabling policy for businesses to flourish in this country. So policies and policy options that support investment in this country, including the whole investment incentives, is what this government provides for starters. So you must make sure that you have policies, you have the incentives under the Uganda Investment Authority, but also you have the markets, and the markets are organized to enable investment. The colleagues that spoke before me talked about the challenges of counterfeits. So government continues to develop standards and other options that support investment in the sector. So that's the first area that the government supports. The second area is about technology transfer to this country. We as government support by putting in place mechanisms that enable transfer of technologies from elsewhere to this country. So piloting and demonstration of technologies before final commercialization by the private sector becomes another area that government supports investment. The third area is on capacity, and here we talk about capacity, both human and infrastructure. So government puts in place the right infrastructure, but also human capacity for enabling investment in the sector. But capacity goes with access to able and patient financing. So government puts in place mechanisms that allow development partners to invest in this country, so that we have access to patient capital for investment in the sector. The fourth area is on data, information, and knowledge for investment. You want market intelligence, you want to know where to invest, whether off-grid and on-grid. Government provides access to this information and supports. I know there's still a lot that we need to do, but that's an area that government continues to invest in, attracting investment by providing information that investors need to have to invest in the sector.
Thank you so much, sir. Brilliant. My second question actually goes to Elizabeth live on Zoom. So we've heard from Alice and her team about Innovate UK, but you're actually a beneficiary. So we want to hear from you to find out kind of what was the experience like working with Innovate UK.
Thanks. So I think Alice's introduction was just a perfect background. Modularity Grid is probably a textbook case of example of a company that has gone through the Innovate UK Energy Catalyst program. We are leading a project in a collaboration. So it's a collaborative project that involves project developers, universities, and technology developers, so that kind of collaboration. And the goal really for us was to deploy, essentially bring technology from the lab to a real world environment, demonstrate it. The goal of our project specifically, and what we've been able to achieve, was to set up a microgrid, an off-grid, standalone hybrid microgrid in a place called Gotngu, a village in Noya district. This microgrid essentially generates electricity from a mixture of solar and biomass, and it has a backup battery system. And essentially the way we designed the setup has meant that we have been able to actually bring down the levelized cost of electricity by such a huge amount. I mean, literally the tariff that we are currently charging, because the system's already up and running and we're going through the final kind of 3 months of the demonstration phase, the tariff that we're charging in the off-grid context is $26 per kilowatt hour. So we've managed to bring down the off-grid electricity tariff to the same level as the grid connected tariff. And I think that's really important because people who live in rural areas, in off-grid areas, businesses in off-grid rural areas of Uganda need to be able to pay less for electricity, or at the very least pay the same amount as businesses and people that live in grid-connected areas. And that is a crucial way to allow rural communities to be able to compete in terms of production costs when it comes to being able to process their agricultural produce and be able to bring that to market at a competitive price. So we're really excited about the project. The other component of it, which has just been fantastic for us, just even the process of deploying it, has been the electric vehicle component. So essentially we got existing petrol vehicles, so three-wheeled vehicles, and we created a simple, straightforward set of procedures, and then worked with local technicians, kind of vehicle repair technicians, to convert those into electric vehicles, and then set up electric vehicle charging. So one vehicle has been transformed into an ambulance, and that ambulance is charged by the mini grid that we've set up. The second is a vehicle that essentially transports batteries to and from the project site. So these are sort of portable batteries for homes that are beyond the direct grid connected area. So it's, this whole project has just been such an excitement for us. Firstly, in terms of, that core goal of affordability. Secondly, in terms of, delivering low carbon energy, and demonstrating a business model that can allow us to deploy our technology in the Uganda context. And I suppose another benefit that has come out of our project has been that we're currently also in the process of commercializing that same technology, albeit with a different business model, in the UK context for a village in Wiltshire.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I mean, even though you're not here in person, your enthusiasm shines right through like you're here. So thank you so much. I've got more questions. By the way, guys, if you see on my phone, I'm not on Instagram. I'm actually just scrolling through the questions. So the next question actually goes through to Alice. A question from Jeffrey from Green Charcoal Uganda, who manufacture briquettes from agricultural waste. They want to know, how can I access funds for our project from Innovate UK? What are the first steps to take for Uganda businesses who are interested in accessing funds? And what do you want to see in successful projects?
So the best way of getting a hold of money is to apply for it when it opens. Sadly, we're funded by a number of bodies. One of them is the Transforming Energy Access Fund, which is run by the FCDO. They've just got given 126 million. It was announced at COP26, so that's great news. And hopefully some of that will trickle down into our programme. So we're hoping to launch a fund, if it works out, in early summerish time, but we just can't guarantee it, and we can't kind of promise anything at the moment. But so the best thing to do is have a look at the Energy Catalyst website or contact myself, and we can put you on a mailing list. And then once that fund opens, what we do is we run lots of collaboration sessions online. It allows you to find partners, understand the programme, kind of find out the challenges and the different opportunities that are available with this programme. And then once that window of opportunity opens and you can apply, we've also got help and support for you to write that application, because we know that government funding isn't always the easiest of funding to get hold of. So yeah, I'd say the best bet is to either look at the Energy Catalyst website or drop us an email, and I believe my contact details are on the website, so check that out.
Thank you so much, Alice. My next question actually for Nexus Green. What are the challenges that Nexus Green have faced as a solar company in Uganda, particularly as pioneers in the field of manufacturing solar panels here in Uganda?
So I guess I'll talk more about the project. In terms of manufacturing solar cells, we're still building our factory, so we're in the process. And I think the key thing is to be able to engage and work and partner with the people in the area in which you're building the factory, and two, local leaders in government. By partnering with government and being in lockstep with them, it allows us to open a lot of doors. It allows us to engage in the community. We bring our own sociologists that go around and make sure our feasibility studies are done, and we make the right decisions for the community. With regards to Nexus Green and our projects, we're traversing the whole country, from Karamoja to Mbarara to Gulu to Soroti. So obviously challenges are sometimes the infrastructure, but we're overcoming that. And then again, every site is different. So when you're looking at 687 sites, they're going to be unique nuances that come with each site, whether it's a borehole not being deep enough, or the water source not being available. So we really do have to send engineering teams out, agronomists, sociologists, all together to work and figure out for this site what is the solution, because we're tailoring our solutions for each of the group of farmers so that we make sure that they achieve the maximum benefit from what Nexus Green has to offer. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I have a question for Gladys. Gladys, somebody's asked, what are your next steps after seeing such success on your farm?
The next step.
Take your time, it's fine.
Yeah, I think it is a very good thing, and I'm really hoping that many of the farmers will embrace this. And also, because we are really lacking water, and climate changes. It's like now, it was raining this morning. You don't know whether to plant. This is supposed to be dry season, and we are supposed to prepare